The night she came back. The wife. He threw away, returned on the arm of a Mafia king. 6 months ago, Ethan Cole dragged his wife out of their own anniversary party by the wrist and told 300 people she was having a breakdown. He handed her divorce papers in the hospital parking lot the next morning. He kept the house, the company, the friends, the story. He thought he'd buried her. Tonight, the doors of the Halverton Gala swing open, and the woman he erased walks in on the arm of the most dangerous man in the city. She isn't crying. She isn't begging. She's smiling. Stay with me until the end of this story, and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this one travels. Hit the like button if you've ever watched someone underestimate the wrong woman. The rain hadn't let up all evening, and by the time the black Maybach rolled to a stop under the canopy of the Halverton Hotel, the sidewalk was a river of reflected gold. Doormen in gray wool coats stepped forward with umbrellas already open, moving the way men move when they've been told, very specifically, not to mess anything up. Inside the car, Vivian Cross was still not looking at the door. She was looking at her own hands. They weren't shaking, which surprised her a little. She had expected them to shake. 6 months ago, these same hands had trembled so badly she couldn't sign her name on a hospital discharge form, and a nurse named Rochelle had finally taken the pen and filled it in for her, saying, "Honey, you just breathe. I got you." Vivian had cried in that hospital bathroom for 40 minutes afterward, sitting on the tile floor in a paper gown. And she remembered thinking, very clearly, "I am never going to be a person again." And now her hands were steady. The emerald on her right ring finger caught the interior light. It wasn't a wedding ring. She would never wear one of those again, not if she lived to be 100. It was a gift from a man who had told her, the first time he handed her a box, that he didn't do promises, only facts. And the fact was, the ring belonged to her now, so she could do whatever she wanted with it. She'd worn it every day since. "You don't have to go in." The voice beside her was low, unhurried, with just enough gravel in it to make strangers sit up straighter without knowing why. Adrian Volkov was watching her from the other seat, one long leg crossed over the other, the crease of his tuxedo trousers so clean it looked like a blade. He had the kind of stillness that wasn't calm so much as it was absence, the stillness of something that had decided a long time ago not to waste motion. "I know I don't have to. I can have the driver pull out. We go back. We order whatever you want. I tell the kitchen to deliver it up." Vivian smiled. Not for him, for herself. For the Vivian of 6 months ago, the one on the bathroom floor, who would have given anything to hear a man speak to her like that. Like leaving wasn't a failure, but a door she was allowed to walk through any time she chose. "I'm not running anymore, Adrian." "I didn't say run. I said reschedule." "It's the same thing. Tonight." He studied her for a moment. Then he nodded once and reached for the door handle. "Then let's go be rude," he said. The Halverton Gala was the kind of event that took itself seriously even when no one else did. It raised money, officially, for a children's literacy initiative, though the literacy initiative had been the same literacy initiative for 11 years running, and no one could quite tell you what it had accomplished. What the gala actually did was this. It sorted the city. It told you, in one room on one night every fall, who still mattered and who was slipping. Invitations went out in September. Dresses were ordered in August. Feuds were timed around it. The ballroom was on the second floor, reached by a double staircase of white marble veined in black. Chandeliers, real crystal, not the fakes they'd had to replace after the renovation in 2019, threw a fractured gold light over a crowd of maybe 400. String quartet on a platform near the east wall. Servers in white gloves. The air smelled like expensive perfume and hot butter from the past hors d'oeuvres. Ethan Cole was near the bar, holding a glass of bourbon he hadn't drunk from in 20 minutes, and he was bored. He hated being bored at his own functions. Not his, technically. Cole Equity had co-sponsored, but the Halverton Committee had 4 sponsors, and the other 3 all wanted to pretend they were the main one. Still. His logo was on the program. His wife was on his arm. Camera 3 was turned toward him every 7 minutes or so, because the Society page editor had a soft spot for his jawline and had said so in print more than once. His wife. He adjusted his cuff and glanced down at her. Kara was 26 years old, a former lifestyle blogger turned content strategist, and she was telling a very long story about a woman named Peyton to a very tired woman named Whitney. Kara wore a pale blue Valentino that had cost Ethan $11,000, and she had, approximately, the energy of a well-groomed Cocker Spaniel. He had married her in a private ceremony in Turks and Caicos, 71 days after his divorce had finalized, and he had spent most of the honeymoon checking his email. It was fine. It was all fine. "Darling," Kara said, turning to him brightly, "Whitney wants to know if we're going to Aspen. Tell her we'll see." "He says we'll see," Kara reported back, as though Whitney had not been 3 feet away the entire time. Ethan took a slow pull of his bourbon and looked out over the room and thought, not for the first time, that Kara made him feel old. Not in a tired way, in a useful way. Like a man at the peak of something, surveying. He was 41. His hair was still all dark. His company had cleared $73 million in reported earnings last year, and quite a bit more that didn't make the reports. He had been called the next something by 3 different magazines in 18 months, and he was no longer sure which something. It hardly mattered. And tonight the mayor was supposed to stop by, and tomorrow a Senate aide was flying in to talk about something that was not yet to be talked about. He was, he thought, precisely where he had planned to be, which was when the room went quiet. It didn't happen all at once. Ethan had been to enough rooms to know that a real silence isn't a silence, it's a weather shift. Conversations didn't stop. They softened. Heads didn't turn altogether. They turned in a slow, uneven wave, the way grass bends under a gust you can see coming across a lawn before you feel it. Someone at the top of the staircase had arrived. Ethan looked up out of habit, the way he always did. The gala was a competition. Entrances mattered. He liked to clock who was showing up with whom. And for a fraction of a second his brain refused to translate what his eyes were sending it. He saw a woman in a black gown. Floor length, one shoulder, some kind of heavy liquid silk that moved like mercury when she breathed. Diamonds at her throat that were not the kind of diamonds you rented. Hair pulled back and low, not showy, the way a woman wears her hair when she has decided she is not the point of what she's wearing. Red lipstick. Not smiling, not frowning, just looking out at the room as though she had been here before and had been disappointed with it. And beside her, one hand resting at the small of her back, not possessive, not touching, just there, was a tall man in a black tuxedo who Ethan had never met and had heard about, in pieces, for almost a decade. Ethan's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. He did not, at first, recognize his ex-wife. Then he did. It landed in his chest like a punch he hadn't seen thrown. "Oh my God," Kara said at a volume that carried. "Oh my God, is that—" "Shut up." "Ethan, shut up." The word came out harder than he meant, and Whitney, tired. Whitney turned her head very slightly and something like a smile touched her mouth, and did not leave. At the top of the stairs, Vivian Cross finished scanning the room, the way you might finish reading a page you had already half memorized. Then, without hurry, she began to descend. 6 months. That was the thing that kept hitting Ethan in small, repeating waves as she came down the staircase. 6 months ago, this woman had weighed 104 pounds and had not slept through a night in 3 weeks. 6 months ago, he had put her in a black town car outside the family home, their home then. And he had leaned through the window and said, "Vivian, I need you to understand. This isn't working. It hasn't been working. You need help, and I can't be the one who gives it to you anymore." And she had nodded because she had stopped being able to do anything but nod, and she had cried very quietly the whole ride to her mother's. He had thought of that ride on and off in the months since, not with guilt, with something closer to pride. He had handled it, he thought. He had been kind. He had been gentle. Another man might have done it worse. The woman coming down the staircase now did not look like she had ever been in that town car. She looked like she owned the staircase. People parted for her the way they parted for the mayor, and the mayor hadn't even arrived. A server with a tray of champagne stepped back so fast he nearly hit a pillar. A woman Ethan had briefly dated before he'd met Vivian, Margot, something at a gallery, wiry and mean, actually laughed out loud, once, a surprised bark, and then clapped a gloved hand over her own mouth. The man beside Vivian was not looking at the room. He was looking at her just slightly, the way a man might watch a driver taking a turn, making sure she was clear. Ethan knew the face now. Knew it from a photograph that had run once in a business magazine 3 years ago, before the magazine's editor had quietly been moved to a different city. Knew it from a conversation he had once had, very late, with a lawyer who had told him, "Ethan, listen, there are names you do not say out loud in this town. I'm going to tell you 4 of them. Write them down. Burn the paper." Adrian Volkov had been the second name. "Ethan." Kara was tugging at his sleeve. "Ethan, you're hurting my hand." He looked down. He had been gripping her fingers hard enough to whiten his own knuckles. He let go. "I need a minute," he said. "A minute for what?" He didn't answer. He set the bourbon on the bar so hard the ice rattled. Vivian did not look at Ethan when she reached the bottom of the staircase. It was the first thing she had decided in the car, on the drive over. She had repeated it to herself twice, like a piece of music she needed to get right. "You will not look for him. He will look for you. And when he finds you, you will let him." She let Adrian guide her, lightly, toward the center of the room, where a small group of women she had once been friends with were standing in a cluster near a floral arrangement taller than any of them. They were pretending to examine the flowers. They were not fooling anyone. "Vivian," one of them said. It came out almost as a question. Sloane Marchetti had been the maid of honor at Vivian's wedding. She was the wife of a real estate developer who owed Cole Equity something in the high 6 figures, and she had stopped returning Vivian's calls 4 days after the separation had become public. "Sloane." Vivian's voice was not cold. It was worse than cold. It was pleasant. "You look—" Sloane's eyes went down and up, and then past Vivian's shoulder, where Adrian was standing with his hands in his trouser pockets, entirely still. Sloane's smile wobbled. "You look incredible, honey." "Thank you. I've been meaning to call you. I have been meaning to call you for months. I swear to God, it has been so crazy. I'm sure. And I was just telling Paul, I was just telling him last week. I said, I have to reach out to Vivian. I have to—" Sloane's teeth clicked shut. "It's all right," Vivian said, softly, almost kindly. "You don't have to do this part." There was a small silence. It's all right," Vivian said again. "Really." And then she smiled, and the smile had nothing underneath it at all. And Sloane Marchetti. Sloane, who had once held Vivian's hair back after a bachelorette party in Miami, who had once cried at Vivian's father's funeral, and meant it, took half a step backward without realizing she had. Adrian's hand did not move on Vivian's back, but something in the air around him did. "Mrs. Cole." The voice came from her right, and Vivian did not turn her head sharply. She turned it the way you turn when you have all the time in the world. It was Hollis Brandt, the society columnist for the Tribune, 60-something, shrewd, ruthlessly polite. Hollis had written 2 flattering pieces about Ethan in the last 8 months, and one particularly nasty one about Vivian, in which Vivian had been described as fragile no fewer than 4 times. It's cross, actually. I went back to my name. "Of course. Forgive me." "Vivian." Hollis's eyes were bright. "You look wonderful. I had no idea you'd be here tonight. Are you—" "I'm a guest." "Of?" Vivian did not answer. She simply glanced, very briefly, at the man beside her. Hollis followed the glance. Hollis Brandt had been doing her job for 31 years. She had interviewed 4 sitting governors, 2 sitting presidents, one man who had later been indicted for racketeering, and a pop star who had eaten a glass of ice cubes during their lunch. She did not fluster easily. She flustered now. "Oh," she said. Adrian inclined his head, half an inch. "Ma'am." "Mr.?" She stopped. She smiled. It was, Vivian thought, a rather professional save, all things considered. "It's a pleasure. Likewise." Hollis's hand holding her phone, her recording app was on. It was always on. Vivian knew this. Drifted down to her side. "Vivian," she said, "may I ask, and you can absolutely say no, is this a public appearance, or are we—" "It's whatever you'd like it to be, Hollis. Write what you see." Vivian let the smile come back, just at the corners of her mouth. "I'd prefer it, actually. It saves time." Tut. Ethan found them. Of course he did. She had known he would. She had not turned to look for him the entire walk across the ballroom floor, and she had known the way a swimmer knows the shore is behind her without having to check, that he was moving toward her. She could feel the shift of the room. People were stepping out of his way too, but differently. Not with awe, with curiosity. A crowd smells a fight coming the way a dog smells weather. Vivian. His voice was low. He had come up on her left, and he had gotten close, closer than was polite, closer than was wise. And she felt, for one thin second, the old instinct to shrink, the old muscle memory. Don't make him louder. Don't make a scene. Smile through it. She did not shrink. She turned. He looked, she thought with a kind of distant surprise, exactly the same. The same jaw, the same hairline, the same cologne. A sandalwood thing he'd worn for 15 years, because his mother had bought him his first bottle when he got into business school, and he was superstitious about it. He looked like a photograph of her old life. He did not look like a threat. That was the new thing, the astonishing thing. Ethan, what are you doing here? I was invited. By who? By Adrian. She said his name without emphasis. She said it the way you say the name of someone who doesn't need to be introduced in a room because the room already knows. Ethan's jaw worked. He glanced for the first time at the man beside her. To his credit, Vivian would admit this later, much later, when she allowed herself to think about it at all. Ethan didn't flinch. He was a good actor. He had always been a good actor. He had once told her in bed in the first year of their marriage that the secret to business was never letting your face be the first thing that lost. Mr. Volkov. Mr. Cole. Adrian's tone was mild. He did not offer his hand, neither did Ethan. I wasn't aware, Ethan said carefully, that you knew my... He stopped himself. He recalibrated. That you knew Vivian. We've known each other a few months. A few months? Yes. I see. I'm not sure you do. It was said quietly. It was said without any heat at all. Vivian watched her ex-husband's face, and she saw, for the first time in the 17 years she had known him, something in his eyes that she had never seen there before. Not anger, not contempt, a small hairline crack of fear. A server was passing with champagne. Adrian lifted 2 flutes off the tray without looking and pressed one, gently, into Vivian's hand. Drink something, he said. Just to her. You haven't. She took it. Ethan watched the handoff. He watched his ex-wife take a glass of champagne from the most dangerous man in the city and lift it without tremor to her mouth. He watched her swallow. He watched her put the glass down on a passing tray, already empty, as if that had been the entire point. He did not know what to do with his own hands. Vivian, he said, and something had gone wrong in his voice, some catch that had not been there before. Can I have a minute? Alone. Just a minute. No? Vivian. I said no, Ethan. Look, I want to apologize, all right? I have wanted to apologize. I have been trying to reach you. You haven't been trying to reach me. I have. You blocked my number in April, Ethan, after I asked you to send back the photo albums. You blocked me, and then you told Sloane that I was harassing you. And Sloane very kindly informed me of that, the one time she picked up her phone. Vivian's voice did not rise. It stayed level, stayed pleasant, and that was the thing that was starting to frighten him. So let's not do this part. Let's not pretend there's a conversation we almost had. There isn't. There never was. That's not... Ethan. He stopped. I am here, she said, because there are some things I'd like people to know. About you, about us, about what you did. I'm going to say some of those things tonight, and you are going to stand there and listen, because you are not going to make a scene with Adrian in the room. Are you? He didn't answer. Are you, Ethan? No. Good. She took a small step back, not away from him. She didn't give him the satisfaction, but toward Adrian, so that her shoulder nearly brushed the lapel of his tuxedo. Adrian did not react. He was watching Ethan the way a man watches a dog he does not yet need to decide about. You look tired, Vivian said almost gently. You should eat something. And then she turned her back on him. There is a particular sound that a room makes when 400 people pretend, all at once, that they have not been listening. It is not silence. It is the rustle of silk and the clink of crystal and the small, sharp uptick in volume as everyone remembers, belatedly, that they were supposed to have been in a different conversation this whole time. It is the scrape of a violin bow as the quartet, bless them, lurches into the second movement of something by Dvořák that they were not meant to play for another 15 minutes. Vivian walked through it like she didn't hear it. Adrian walked beside her. Near the east wall, a circle of men had been standing for some time in the half-watching, half-pretending not to watch way that men in that tax bracket adopt at galas. Vivian had clocked them when she'd come in. Bankers, mostly. One developer. One man who owned a majority share in a logistics firm that had done very profitable work for the state over the last decade, and whose name had, in certain sealed documents that Adrian's people had been kind enough to share, appeared alongside Ethan's more than once. She stopped in front of that man. Mr. Halden. Preston Halden was 68, silver-haired, built like a retired linebacker running to softness. He was holding a scotch and smiling with the practiced blandness of a man who had been smiling at strangers for 40 years. Mrs. Cross? Just Cross. Forgive me. Vivian? He recovered. What a lovely surprise. How have you been? I've been busy, actually. Oh? Reading. Halden's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes began slowly to dim. Anything good? Contracts, mostly. A beat. I see. Do you? Adrian, beside her, had not said a word. He was holding his champagne flute by the stem, and his thumb was tracing, very lightly, the rim of it. The motion was nothing. It was less than nothing. Preston Halden had been in rooms with men like Adrian Volkov precisely twice in his life, and on both occasions he had not slept well for a week afterward, and he recognized the thumb on the rim for what it was. Vivian, Halden said, and he had lowered his voice without meaning to, is there something I can help you with? Not tonight. Not tonight, Mr. Halden. I only wanted to say hello. It's been such a long time. She let the smile widen. I'm sure we'll see each other again very soon. She moved on. Halden watched her go, and the scotch in his hand, he realized 20 seconds later, with a small and unpleasant jolt, was trembling. Well, are you all right? They had stepped briefly into the relative quiet of an alcove near the terrace doors. A potted palm half shielded them from the main floor. Adrian had lowered his head toward hers, not touching her, just close enough that his voice did not have to carry. I'm fine. Your hands. She looked down. She hadn't noticed. The champagne flute, she was holding a fresh one, she didn't remember taking it, was vibrating very slightly against her fingers. Not a tremble of fear, a tremble of something else, something with a lot of current in it. Adrian reached out and, with a gentleness that did not match the rest of him, took the flute out of her hand. Breathe. I am breathing. Breathe out. She let out a breath she had not known she was holding. It was shakier, on the way out, than she wanted it to be. Vivian? I'm fine. I'm doing this. I know you are. I need... She stopped. She pressed the heel of her hand briefly under her own collarbone, like she was steadying something there. I need you to not be kind to me for about the next hour. Okay? I need you to be what you are out there, not this. All right? If you're kind to me, I'm going to start crying, and I cannot start crying in this dress. All right. Don't... Her voice cracked just once, and she corrected it. Don't laugh. I'm not laughing. You're laughing on the inside. I am not. Adrian. He was laughing on the inside, just a little. She could see it in the corner of his mouth, the smallest possible softening. I'm not mocking you, he said. I want you to know that. I know. Everything you are doing out there, that is the hardest thing I have ever watched a person do. And I have watched a lot of people do a lot of hard things. She swallowed. Adrian, stop it. Okay. Stop being nice. Okay? A beat. He handed the flute back to her. His face had smoothed again into the flat, unreadable thing the rest of the room saw. Better? Yes. Good, because your ex-husband is walking over here again. What? Ethan had, in fact, spent the last 11 minutes trying to pretend he had not been walking toward her again. He had stopped at the bar. He had made eye contact with a board member. He had laughed, hollowly, at something Kara had said, though Kara had since been absorbed into a knot of women near the Raw bar and was no longer his problem. He had tried to text his lawyer and had realized, with a small hot wash of panic, that he wasn't sure what he wanted the lawyer to do. And then his feet had started carrying him back. He found Vivian near the terrace. The man, Volkov, was still next to her, though not quite so close now, a polite distance. Ethan clung briefly and foolishly to the polite distance as though it meant something. Vivian. Ethan. We need to talk. We've talked. We haven't talked. Not about this. Not about whatever this is. This is me, at a party. Come on. His voice had risen. Two women nearby turned their heads and pretended very badly that they hadn't. Vivian watched him for a long moment. All right, she said finally. Fine. Let's talk. Somewhere private. No, here. Vivian. Here is fine, Ethan. What do you want to say? He stared at her. It occurred to him with a kind of late, helpless clarity that he did not know. He had wanted for a long time to know that she was okay. He had wanted for a longer time to know that she was not okay, that she missed him, that she had been broken by him a little, in the way that let a man feel expansive about himself. He had wanted her to call, and he had wanted her to not call, and somewhere in there he had wanted her to evaporate entirely, to become someone he could mention in passing to a new investor over dinner and not have to think about in the car on the way home. He had not wanted her to walk into the Halverton Gala in $10,000 worth of diamonds on the arm of Adrian Volkov. What are you doing with him? He said, at last, and it came out lower than he'd meant, almost a whisper. Vivian, what? He's not... You don't know what he is. I know exactly what he is. You don't. Ethan, of the two of us, which one has been married to you? It hit him like a slap. He actually took half a step back. That's not fair. No, she agreed. It isn't. I made mistakes. You made choices. But I didn't, Vivian, I didn't deserve this. Whatever this is, whatever you're planning, I didn't deserve. She laughed. It was a short laugh, not loud, not cruel. It was the laugh of a woman who has heard something so genuinely stupid that she cannot, in the moment, think of anything else to do with it. Didn't deserve this, she repeated softly. Vivian. Tell me, Ethan. She had stepped closer to him, almost imperceptibly, and her voice had gone very low, and he had the sudden terrible sense that they were not in a ballroom at all, but somewhere much smaller, somewhere with no one else in it. Did I deserve it? Viv. Did I deserve the night in April when you told me I was, quote, embarrassing you at dinner because I had asked Paul Marchetti what his daughter's name was? And you said, do you remember what you said, Ethan? You said, Jesus Christ, Vivian, what is wrong with you? Are you on something? In front of 6 people. Did I deserve it in May when you started sleeping in the guest room and telling your mother it was because I snored, when what I actually was pregnant? Ethan, I was pregnant, and you knew because I had told you 11 days earlier in the kitchen, and you said you needed to think about it. Vivian, did I deserve it in July when I lost the pregnancy alone in the upstairs bathroom while you were in Aspen with a 26-year-old, and I had to call an Uber at 4 a.m. because I couldn't reach you because you had, quote, accidentally left your phone in the hotel safe all weekend? Stop it. He had hissed it. She had not. Did I deserve it, Ethan, in September when you told 300 people at our anniversary party that I was having a breakdown and you walked me out of the room by my wrist and the bruise was there for 9 days? 9 days, Ethan, I counted. And you texted me on day 4 to ask if I could still make it to the Hoffman wedding because it would look bad if I didn't? Her voice had not risen. That was the astonishing part. It had not risen once. Did I deserve that? He didn't answer. Did I, Ethan? No. Say it louder. No. Thank you. She stepped back. She was trembling again a little. She did not try to hide it this time. Adrian, behind her shoulder, had not moved. He was watching Ethan's face the way a man watches a window he suspects is about to break. I'm going to go enjoy the rest of the evening now, Vivian said. and her voice had gone pleasant again, terrifyingly pleasant, the way it had been with Sloane, with Halden, with Hollis. "I hope you do too." She turned away. Ethan stood where she left him for a long moment, and a woman to his left. He did not know her. He would never know her. She was someone's date, someone's cousin. No one leaned over to her companion and said, not quite quietly enough, "That was his wife?" Ethan heard it. He walked slowly back to the bar. He ordered another bourbon. He did not drink it. Across the room, Vivian Cross was laughing, softly, at something a senator had said. The senator was laughing too, and leaning in, and had not, Ethan realized, laughed like that at him in 4 years. Adrian Volkov stood at her elbow with a champagne flute he was not drinking from, and every so often, just every so often, his eyes moved across the room and found Ethan and did not linger and moved on. Ethan's phone buzzed. It was his assistant, a single line. "Sir, the mayor just called. He's not coming tonight. He said to send his regrets." Ethan stared at the message. He stared at it for a long time. Outside, the rain was still falling on the canopy of the Halverton Hotel, and inside, his ex-wife was being introduced, quietly, to the wife of the Attorney General, and the quartet had moved, cleanly and without error, into the next piece. The mayor's cancellation was not, in itself, a fatal thing. Mayors canceled. Mayors were always canceling. They had assistants who called on their behalf to cancel, and the assistants had their own small, well-rehearsed scripts. Unexpected obligation, regrets deeply, sends his best. And Ethan Cole had received versions of that script probably 30 times in his career without blinking. He was blinking now. He read the message 3 times, standing at the bar with the bourbon he wasn't drinking, and on the third read he noticed, with a small and lucid clarity, that his assistant had phrased the message in a particular way. He said to send his regrets. Not he sends his regrets. The mayor had told someone to do the sending. The mayor had not wanted his own voice on the thing. The mayor had not even wanted his own name at the top of the text. Ethan was not, by nature, a man who read into phrasing. Phrasing was for his lawyers. He had employed phrasing readers for a long time, precisely so he would not have to be one. But tonight, here, at this bar, with his ex-wife 30 feet away being introduced to the Attorney General's wife, tonight he read phrasing, and phrasing was telling him something that sat in his stomach like a cold stone. The mayor had heard that Adrian Volkov was here. The mayor had heard which arm Adrian Volkov had walked in on. The mayor had, in the space of about 11 minutes, done the small, sensible math of a man who is running for state comptroller next spring and had decided that he did not, on reflection, want to be photographed. Shaking Ethan Cole's hand in a room that also contained the aforementioned arm. Ethan set the phone face down on the bar. "You okay?" It was Kara. She had detached at last from the knot at the raw bar, and her lipstick was a little blurred at one corner, and she was looking at him with the particular wide-eyed softness of a woman who had just realized, through no fault of her own, that something in her evening had gone very wrong without her being told. "I'm fine." "Babe, you look—" "I'm fine, Kara." She flinched almost imperceptibly. He saw it. He hated for a thin, hot second that he saw it, because seeing it meant he would have to, at some point in the next hour, apologize for it, and he did not have the energy for the apology, or the energy for the conversation that would follow the apology. He reached for her hand without looking at her, and he squeezed it, and he said in a much softer voice, "Sorry, I'm sorry. Work thing. Give me a minute." "Is it her?" "What?" Kara was not looking at him. She was looking across the room. At the senator, at Adrian, at Vivian. "That's Vivian, right? That's her." "Kara." "I'm just asking, babe." "Yes, that's her." "She looks—" "Don't." "I was going to say different." "Don't." Kara was quiet for a moment, and then she said with a small, surprising flash of something underneath the Cocker Spaniel voice, "You didn't tell me she was beautiful, Ethan." He looked at her finally. "She wasn't," he said. "Before." "Okay." "Kara." "She wasn't." "Okay, babe." She kissed his cheek. She did not quite mean it. She walked away from him toward the powder room, and her shoulders, under the pale blue Valentino, were a little higher than they had been before. Ethan picked his phone back up. Across the ballroom, Vivian was discovering something she had not expected to discover, which was that she had forgotten how to be flattered. The Attorney General's wife, her name was Noor Rahimi Fletcher. She had been on the cover of Vanity Fair 18 months earlier in a piece about women who were, quote, rewriting the rules of philanthropy, was telling her with what appeared to be genuine warmth that she had followed Vivian's foundation work from a distance and had been so hoping to meet her in person. Vivian did not have a foundation. Vivian had, 6 weeks ago, a single-page website and a provisional 501c3 filing for a thing called the Haven Legal Fund, which had been Adrian's lawyer's suggestion. The fund paid for attorneys for women who could not afford to leave the men they needed to leave. It had been set up initially as a place to park $3.5 million that Adrian had said, mildly, he would rather not keep in a personal account. The first grant had gone out in August, the second in September. The third, just last week, had gone to a woman in Queens whose husband was a dentist, and whose husband had broken her jaw in June, and who had, 3 days after receiving the grant, successfully gotten a restraining order that named not only her husband, but her mother-in-law, who had been, according to the filings, the logistical center of the whole arrangement for 20 years. Vivian had not told anyone about any of this. She had not, until this moment, realized that anyone had been watching. "I'm sorry," Vivian said. "Who told you about the Haven Fund?" Noor's smile was sly. "Honey, women tell women." "Which women?" "That would be telling." She touched Vivian's wrist lightly. Her nails were short and unpolished, which Vivian found, for some reason, enormously reassuring. "I'd love to have lunch," Noor said. "If you're ever free. I'm in the city most Thursdays." "I'm free. I'll have my office call yours." "I don't have an office." "Then I'll call you myself." She reached into a small black clutch, produced a card the color of cream, and pressed it into Vivian's palm. Her thumb, very briefly, touched the inside of Vivian's wrist, the place where a pulse lives, and Vivian felt, to her own astonishment, the beginning of tears prick at the inside of her eyelids. She blinked them back. She smiled. She put the card carefully into the small clutch Adrian had bought her in Milan in August. She said thank you. She said the right things. Noor Rahimi Fletcher drifted back toward her husband, and the Senator Vivian had been laughing with drifted, politely, toward a knot of donors he had been neglecting, and Vivian found herself, for the first time that night, standing beside Adrian with no one else immediately claiming her. "You're crying," he said, without turning his head. "I'm not." "You almost were." "Almost doesn't count." "Okay." A pause. "She was nice to me," Vivian said. "I don't know what to do when people are nice to me anymore." "You say thank you." "I did." "Then you're doing it right." She looked up at him. He was still watching the room. He had not looked down at her once during the Noor conversation. She had known, the whole time, that he had been listening to every word. "Adrian." How did the mayor find out you were here?" "I told him." "When?" 20 minutes ago." "How?" "I had someone call." She absorbed this. "Who?" He finally looked down at her. His eyes, under the chandelier light, were the color of wet slate. "You don't need to know the who tonight. You'll know him in about 2 weeks, when the paperwork on the Halden thing comes back. You'll like him. He's funny. Ex-FBI. Bad at poker." "Adrian." "Vivian." "I said I wanted to do this myself. You are doing it yourself." "I removed an obstacle. The mayor is not your business tonight, and I did not want him in the photographs. That is not stealing your thunder. That is maintenance. That's—" She wanted to argue with him. She could feel the argument, shaped and ready, at the back of her throat. "That is not how this works. That is not what we agreed." But she could not, in the moment, quite remember what they had agreed, because what they had agreed had been, largely, that she would decide. And the thing he had decided for her tonight was, she had to admit, a thing she would have decided for herself if she had been thinking about it, and had been smaller and meaner inside her own skin than she was currently willing to be. She let the argument go. "Okay. Okay? Okay. You'll yell at me in the car." "Yes." "Good." The dinner seating was at 9. There were 42 tables, each of 10, draped in midnight blue linen with low arrangements of white ranunculus and silver eucalyptus that had been flown in from somewhere in Oregon for reasons nobody had thought to question. The place cards had been set by the Halverton Committee 3 weeks earlier in the long, intricate, venomous choreography that always preceded these evenings. And the choreography had assumed in its calculations that Vivian Cross was not going to be in the room. It had therefore seated Ethan and Kara Cole at table 6, 3 tables from the stage, in the full and favorable sightline of the podium. It had seated Adrian Volkov, who had donated, last minute, cash through a shell called Brace Holdings LLC, the single largest gift of the evening, at table 1. Vivian's name had been added to table 1 in pen, in Hollis Brandt's handwriting, about 11 minutes after Hollis had figured out what was happening. Table 1 was directly between the podium and table 6. Vivian took her seat, and she placed her clutch on the table, and she arranged her napkin across her lap, and she lifted her eyes once, briefly, across the floor to Ethan Cole, who was lowering himself into the chair at table 6, as though the chair might bite him. She did not smile at him. She did not need to. She turned back to her own table and found that she was seated next to an older man with kind eyes and a very bad toupee, who had introduced himself as Desmond Eklund, a name she knew from newspapers and did not for a moment place, and who had poured her a glass of water without being asked. "You're the Eklund," she said, remembering. "Eklund Press. Guilty. You published my father." Desmond Eklund blinked. "Your father was Charles Cross." "Oh my goodness." His face shifted, softened, opened. "Oh my goodness. The Rail in the Road. That book. That book sold. It sold. We reprinted it 8 times, 9 times. 9. I know. I came to the funeral. I remember. You were... How old? 14? 15. 15. You gave a speech. You stood up there in front of all of those old men, and you gave the most... I'm sorry, you probably don't want to. It's all right. I wrote to your mother afterward. I don't know if she kept the letter. Oh. Desmond Eklund had, for no reason he could articulate, eyes that were wet. He covered it by reaching, with a small fumble, for his water glass. He took a sip. He put it down. "Forgive me," he said. "It's been a strange evening." "It has. May I ask you a question, Miss Cross?" "You may. Are you—" He glanced with the instinct of a man who had run a publishing house for 31 years toward Adrian, toward the room, toward Ethan across the floor. "Are you writing anything?" "No." "Are you thinking about writing anything?" "Every day for 6 months, Mr. Eklund." "Ah." "I'm not ready." "No, I wouldn't think you were." "When I am ready, you'll call me." "I will." "You'll call me first." "Yes." He reached for the water glass again. He did not drink from it this time. He simply held it, as though he needed something to do with his hand. "Your father," he said quietly, "would be—" And then he stopped himself, because he was, after all, a publisher, and publishers know, better than almost anyone, what not to say. He let the sentence end itself. Vivian, to her own surprise, reached over and patted very briefly the back of his hand. "Thank you, Desmond." "Yes." Across the room, Ethan Cole watched his ex-wife lean in and pat the hand of Desmond Eklund of Eklund Press, and he could not, from 3 tables away, hear a word of what had been said, and the not hearing was, somehow, worse than the hearing would have been. So, Kara beside him had unfolded her napkin and was now, surreptitiously, under the table looking at her own phone. "Put it away." "Babe, I'm just—" "Kara, put it away." She put it away. The first course arrived. It was some kind of crudo. Ethan looked at it and felt a deep, full-body revulsion at the idea of putting food into his mouth, which was strange because Ethan Cole had been hungry, in a low-grade way, for approximately his entire adult life. He picked up his fork. He put his fork down. "Ethan Cole." The voice came from his right. Not Kara's side. The other side. He turned. A woman had slid into the empty seat beside him. The place card for that seat read L. Wakefield, and L. Wakefield had apparently not yet arrived, or had arrived and been waylaid, or had been usurped. Ethan didn't know and didn't care. And this woman was not Wakefield. This woman was short, 60, silver-haired, dressed in a simple black jacket over a white blouse, and she was wearing, around her neck, a thin gold chain with a small gold bar on it, engraved with something Ethan could not read. "I'm sorry," he said. "Do I know you?" "No." "Then, Ingrid Halverson, Manhattan Business Review." He went still. Manhattan Business Review was not the Tribune. It was not the Society page. It was the thing that the Society page was afraid of. It was the publication that had, in the last 9 years, ended the careers of 4 sitting CEOs, 2 members of the Federal Reserve, and 1 sitting lieutenant governor. Ingrid Halverson had broken, just last spring, a story about a hedge fund that had led to 3 indictments and, eventually, 1 quiet suicide in a hotel in Basel. Ethan's whole body had turned, approximately, into ice. "Ms. Halverson." "You can call me Ingrid. What are you doing at my—" "It's not your table, technically. I was assigned to this table." "So was I. Earlier today." "By whom?" "Committee." "Which committee member?" Ingrid Halverson smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was a polite smile. She had a small, neat smile that had disassembled, in its time, $3 billion corporations. "Mr. Cole," she said, "how well do you know a man named Preston Halden?" He stared at her. "I'm sorry?" "Preston Halden, Halden Logistics. You had lunch with him in January at the University Club. You had lunch with him again in April at his house in Oyster Bay. His daughter's name is Quinn. Quinn played field hockey at Middlebury. You asked after her. You told Halden you'd put in a word for her at an investment firm that your cousin sits on the board of. You said, quote, 'Happy to help. She sounds like a star.'" Ethan had not, in his life, felt his mouth go quite so dry, quite so fast. "Ms. Halvor, Ingrid, I'm not going to have this conversation at a—" "I'm not asking you to have the conversation here. I'm giving you the courtesy of knowing that the conversation exists." "I don't—" "I'm going to call your office on Monday. My office will—" "Your office is not going to screen me, Mr. Cole. I know how to get through your office. I know the name of your assistant's assistant, and I know that her fiancé has a warrant in Florida for an unpaid— Jesus Christ. I'm telling you this as a kindness, do you understand? Because I'm going to call on Monday, and I'm going to ask you for comment on a story that is going to run on Wednesday, and I would like you to have the weekend to prepare a comment that is going to be useful to you." "Useful?" "Yes. Useful, Mr. Cole." Her voice dropped, softly, almost kindly. "I am telling you that you have until Monday morning. I am telling you this because I was taught, 35 years ago, by a woman who had been a war correspondent in 2 wars, that it is never, ever the journalist's job to surprise the subject. That's not the game. The game is, you make the call, and you let the man decide how he wants to be remembered." "I don't understand what you're—" "Yes, you do." She picked up her water glass. She took a small, quiet sip. "Enjoy your crudo, Mr. Cole." "Who put you at this table?" "I did." "Who—" "No, Mr. Cole, look at me." He looked. Her eyes were brown. They were not unkind. They were also, he understood suddenly, the last thing a number of men had looked into before their lives had changed. "I am at this table because I have been working on this story for 4 months. I have been working on this story since June. I did not know, until 40 minutes ago, that Vivian Cross was going to be here tonight. I did not coordinate with anyone. I have not spoken with—" Her eyes flicked, minutely, toward table 1, and came back. "With anyone over there. If I had known, I might have stayed home. You are going to imagine, I suspect, that the 2 things are connected. I am telling you they are not. I am telling you because I would like you to spend your weekend preparing a comment, and not a conspiracy." She set down her water glass. "I look forward to speaking with you on Monday." She stood. She did not go far. She went, in fact, only 2 tables over, to a seat that had been empty, at a table of people Ethan did not recognize. She sat. She opened her napkin. She smiled across at a woman who appeared to be her wife. She began, to all appearances, to enjoy her evening. Ethan looked down at his crudo. He could not any longer see the plate. The edges of his vision had gone soft and dark and strange, and a ringing had started somewhere behind his right ear that he knew from past experience was the ringing that happened in the very early stages of a very bad panic attack. He took a breath. He took another. "Babe?" Kara's voice from his left sounded like it was coming through water. "Babe, are you—" "I'm fine." "You don't—" Kara. Came out as a hiss. Two people at the next table glanced over. He closed his eyes. He forced the breath down. "I'm fine. I'm sorry. I'm fine. I need to make a phone call. I'll be right back. Ethan, I'll be right back." He stood. He did not look at table 1 on his way out of the ballroom. He could feel, with absolute precision, the moment he passed into and out of Adrian Volkov's peripheral vision. He could feel, though he did not see it, the exact half-second when Vivian's eyes registered him leaving and went calmly back to her conversation with Desmond Ickland, and that half-second was worse than a lifetime of her shouting at him would have been. Until he made it into the corridor, and then into a side hallway, and then into a small private lounge that the Halverton kept for VIP guests, and which was, mercifully, empty. He sat down on a velvet ottoman. He put his face in his hands. He was 41 years old, and he was the founding partner of Cole Equity. And he had, in the last 40 minutes, watched his mayor cancel on him, his ex-wife gut him with a 3-minute summary of the last year of their marriage. A financial reporter he had been vaguely aware of deliver an extinction notice across a bowl of raw scallops, and his second wife look at him with an expression of polite, dawning reevaluation that he had absolutely not earned. He pulled out his phone. He opened his text messages. He scrolled, his thumb jittering, up past the last message from his assistant, past the mayor's regrets, past an email thread about a Senate aide who, he saw now, with a hard small jolt, had been very quiet indeed for the last 3 days. He found the contact he was looking for. Marty. Marty Rosenthal had been Ethan's lawyer for 11 years. Marty was not the lawyer Ethan used for his divorces or his mergers. Marty was the lawyer Ethan used, in the way that certain men use certain lawyers, to keep certain documents in certain filing cabinets, in certain offices that were not, strictly speaking, in the same state as the transactions those documents described. Marty was, in his way, a very good friend. Marty was also the man who had said to Ethan 18 months ago, "Ethan, I want you to listen to me." The Halden situation. The Halden situation is not a situation. Say yes, and we do it cleanly. Say no, and we do not do it at all. We do not do it messy. We do not do it sideways. Messy is how people end up in Basel. Ethan had at the time said yes. Ethan had then, in the course of executing the yes, done it sideways. He dialed. Marty picked up on the second ring. "Ethan." "Marty, we have a—" "I know." "You know?" "Halverson's been calling my office for 2 weeks. Ethan was silent for a long, stunned moment. "Marty, 2 weeks. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to do anything. I told her we'd get back to her. I told her we needed to understand the scope of the inquiry. I was doing what I do, Ethan. I was buying time. She just cornered me at my dinner table, Marty." "What?" "She walked up to my table. She sat down next to me. She told me she knew about Halden, about the lunch, about Quinn, about the— Christ. She told me she's calling Monday." Silence. "Marty?" "She said Quinn by name. She said Middlebury field hockey, Marty. Ethan, listen to me. Ethan, where are you right now?" "The Halverton, the gala." "Is Vivian there?" Ethan's throat closed briefly. "You heard." "Ethan, is Vivian there?" "Yes." "With who?" "You already know." Silence. A long one. And then, very quietly, Marty Rosenthal, who had, in his 22 years of practice, negotiated a plea deal with a sitting U.S. attorney at 2 a.m. in a hotel suite in Geneva, and who was not a man who was easily knocked, said, in a voice Ethan had never heard him use before, "Oh, Ethan." "Marty." "Oh, Ethan. Oh, Ethan." "What does that mean?" "You didn't call me, Ethan, when you started when the thing with Kara, when the thing with Vivian. You didn't call me. You told me later. You told me at Christmas. You remember?" In the study. You told me about the paperwork. I said, I said, Ethan, how did you handle the assets? I said, did you handle it clean? And you said, yes. And I said, Ethan, are you sure? And you said, Marty. You said, yes, Marty. Jesus Christ, I handled it. What are you, my mother? Marty, I don't need. You didn't handle it clean. Marty, Ethan, you didn't handle it clean. Marty, I don't need the postmortem right now, all right? I need to know what you're going to do for me between tonight and Monday. A pause. Ethan, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm listening. I'm going to call you back in 45 minutes. Marty, I'm going to call you back in 45 minutes. I need to make 2 calls before I call you. I need you to go back into that ballroom. I need you to sit down at your table. I need you to eat your dinner. I need you to eat your dinner, Ethan. I need you to put a piece of food in your mouth and chew and swallow and smile at the person on your left. I need you to do that about 6 times. I need you to not leave early. I need you to not look at Vivian, and I need you to not look at Volkov. And I need you, Ethan, I need you to not look at Halverson. I need you to sit at your table, and I need you to behave for the next 45 minutes, like a man who is not afraid. Because there are 200 people in that room, and tomorrow 180 of them are going to be telling a story about you, and the story they tell tomorrow is going to be determined almost entirely by what you do in the next 45 minutes. Marty, Eat your dinner, Ethan. I don't know if I can. You can. You will. I'm hanging up now. 45 minutes. The line went dead. Ethan sat on the ottoman for a long moment. His hands were trembling. He stared down at them, and he thought distantly that he had never, in his life, seen his own hands shake like that. Not on his wedding day. Not at his father's funeral. Not in the boardroom last November when the Saudi deal had almost gone to pieces, and he had saved it somehow, with a joke about the weather. He took a breath. He stood up. He walked, with very careful steps, to the small washroom attached to the VIP lounge, and he splashed cold water on his face, and he looked at himself in the mirror. His hair was still good. His tie was still straight. His eyes, under the potlights, looked like the eyes of a man who had just seen a car hit a dog in the street and had not yet decided whether to pull over. He fixed the eyes. He did it the way he had learned to do it, a long time ago, in a mirror in a bathroom in Wharton. He fixed the corners. He fixed the jaw. He pulled, from somewhere very deep and very practiced, the face that belonged to Ethan Cole of Cole Equity. Confident, warm, a little amused by the whole business of being alive. He buttoned his jacket. He went back to his dinner. He did what Marty had told him to do. He did it like a man performing a difficult magic trick for a small, unimpressed audience. He sat. He smiled at Kara. He smiled at the woman across the table whose name he could not immediately retrieve. Pembroke? Pembroke? And he engaged her in a conversation about her son's wedding, which he had, by some miracle, remembered a small fact about. He put crudo in his mouth. He chewed. He swallowed. The crudo tasted like nothing. He put it in his mouth again. He took a sip of wine and was surprised that the wine still tasted like wine. At table 1, his ex-wife was laughing at something an ambassador's husband had said. She laughed with her whole face. He had not, he realized with a small strange pang, seen her laugh like that in 5 or 6 years. He had stopped being able to make her laugh like that sometime around... when? Sometime around the pregnancy they had lost before this last one. The first one. 8 years ago now. She had laughed less after that. He had told himself at the time that she was just getting older, that it was natural, that married women laughed less. He had not at the time considered the other option. Adrian Volkov, at table 1, did not laugh. He watched Vivian laugh, and his mouth moved a little at the corner, and that was all. He did not, Ethan noticed, eat very much. He cut small, precise bites. He chewed. He swallowed. He set his knife and fork down between bites in the continental way, and his hands, between bites, did not fidget. He was not, Ethan understood, drunk, and he was not going to be. He was doing some other thing. He was running some other calculation, low and quiet, behind his eyes, the entire time. Once, only once, Adrian Volkov looked up across the room, and his eyes found Ethan's across the flower arrangements and held for perhaps 2 seconds and let go. Ethan felt the hair on his forearms lift under his tuxedo shirt. He looked back down at his plate. He took a breath. He smiled at Kara. Kara, who had been watching all of this with the dull, slow gathering intelligence of a woman who had spent her 20s being underestimated, and who was now, to her own surprise, 26 years old and married to a man she was beginning, very quietly, to suspect she did not actually know, smiled back. The second course came. Somewhere in the middle of it, Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. Excuse. He waited, against every instinct. He waited until the course was cleared. He waited until Kara had gone to the powder room. He waited until Pembroke had turned to her husband on the other side. And then, under the tablecloth, with the screen shielded by his napkin, he read the message. It was not from Marty. It was from an unknown number with a 347 area code. The message contained no words. It contained a single photograph. The photograph had been taken by the look of it on a phone through a car window at a slight angle. It showed a man in a gray suit getting out of a black sedan in front of a federal building in Lower Manhattan. The man in the gray suit was carrying a briefcase. The man in the gray suit was Preston Halden. The photograph had a timestamp. The timestamp was this afternoon, 4:41 p.m. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. He realized with a small, cold lurch that Preston Halden had been in the federal building this afternoon at 4:41 p.m. while Ethan had been in his office choosing a tie, and Halden had been smiling at him at this gala an hour ago, holding a scotch, telling Vivian it was a lovely surprise. And the scotch, Ethan saw now in his memory, had been shaking. The scotch in Halden's hand. Ethan put the phone, face down, back in his pocket. He did not look at table 1. He did not look at table 4, where Ingrid Halverson was buttering a piece of bread for her wife. He picked up his fork. He put a piece of food in his mouth. He chewed. He swallowed. At table 1, Vivian Cross lifted her water glass and caught the reflection of the chandelier in it and did not drink. She only looked, across the rim, toward the man across the room who had once called her fragile in a parking lot. He was eating his dinner with great concentration, and his hand, holding the fork, was no longer entirely steady, and the light had changed on him, somehow, in a way she would not have been able once to describe. He looked, she thought, smaller. She set the water glass down, untouched, and turned back to Desmond Eklund, who was telling her with a kind of shy old man delight about a manuscript he'd read the previous week by a young woman from Minnesota who wrote, he said, "The way your father used to write, Miss Cross, the exact same way." And Vivian listened, and she smiled, and somewhere under her ribs, in a small hot place she had thought long cauterized, something that had been waiting for 6 months began, very quietly, to loosen. The string quartet, on the platform near the east wall, finished one piece and began another, and the second piece was slower and lower, and the bow of the cello came down on the first long note and held it, and the note hung in the air over the ballroom like a thing that knew it was being listened to. The cello held its note, and the room, without quite knowing it, held its breath with it. Vivian did not look away from Desmond Eklund. She wanted to, badly. She could feel, in her peripheral vision, the exact shape of Ethan at his table, the tilt of his shoulders, the way his left hand had gone down to his lap and stayed there, the way his right hand had kept moving through the motions of the fork because Marty Rosenthal had told him to. She could feel him the way you feel a person you used to sleep beside, not as a presence in the room so much as a shift in the air pressure. 17 years did not unlearn that, and she was not stupid enough to pretend it had. But she did not look. She kept her eyes on Desmond, and she asked him a small, real question about the young woman from Minnesota. Was she represented? Was she working with an agent? Had anyone else seen the manuscript? And Desmond, who had been half prepared for the gentle brush-off he was used to getting from heiresses at charity dinners, blinked and gathered himself and answered her properly. "She's not represented." "How did it come to you?" "Her high school English teacher, old friend of mine, taught with me in Madison 30 years ago, sent me the first 50 pages in a manila envelope. Actual envelope, stamp and everything." "Did you write back?" "I called him." "And what did you say?" Desmond laughed. It was a short, surprised, almost boyish laugh, and two women at the next table glanced over and smiled the way women smile when an old man laughs honestly. "I told him," he said, "that I was going to retire now, in peace, Because I had read something that made me feel like my job had not been for nothing. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. Desmond. Yes. Give me her name. Vivian, not for the foundation, for me. I'd like to write to her. You'd like to, not as anyone, just as a reader. I'd like to tell her that someone read her first 50 pages on a Tuesday and thought about them on a Wednesday. That's all. Desmond Eklund, who had been the kind of publisher who had watched industries eat themselves and friends turn into shareholders, and shareholders turn into strangers, and who had, in the last 11 years, gone to the funerals of more people than he cared to count, put down his fork very carefully on the edge of his plate. I'll give you her name, he said, after the speeches. Thank you. Vivian. Yes? You know your father used to say... He stopped himself. He shook his head once. Never mind. It's a long night. I'll tell you another time. Tell me. Another time. Tell me now. He looked at her. The thing behind his eyes was not, Vivian saw, the sentimental thing she had been prepared for. It was sharper. He was a publisher. Publishers watched for weight. Your father used to say, he said, that the only people worth publishing were people who had once had their mouths full of dirt. Who had eaten it? Who knew what it tasted like? He said, this is nearly word for word, Desmond, save me from the ones who've only read about it. Give me the ones who've chewed. A pause. I didn't know what he meant when I was younger. I thought it was a pose. I think I understand it now. Vivian did not say anything for a moment. Then she reached very quietly for her water glass, and she took one sip, and she set it down again. I've chewed, Desmond. I know, sweetheart. Don't call me sweetheart. Sorry. It's all right. I don't mind from you. He laughed, low. Your father was the same. Could not stand honey. Got thrown out of a room in '82 for correcting an editor about it. Took him 4 years to get back in that building. Sounds about right. But a tap, softly, on a microphone. Across the room, up on the small raised platform by the east wall, a woman in a dove-gray gown had stepped up to the podium. She was the chair of the Halverton Committee. Her name was Margaret Yu. She was 62. She had been the chair for 9 years, and she had the specific, hard-won poise of a woman who had been introducing rich people to other rich people for half her life. Good evening, she said, and the room began the small, rustling, familiar work of arranging itself to listen. Vivian felt Adrian's hand come, for the first time that evening, to rest openly on the back of her chair. Not her shoulder. The chair. A small, precise claim, visible to the room, read instantly by anyone with eyes. She did not acknowledge it. She turned her face politely toward the podium and kept her hands folded on her lap. Across the room, Ethan Cole did the same. Margaret Yu welcomed everyone. She named the sponsors. She named Cole Equity. And her mouth did not move when she said it, and her eyes, which had been professionally warm for every other sponsor, went, for the length of 2 syllables, flat. She named Brace Holdings LLC, and she did not look at Table 1 because Ingrid Halverson was watching, and Margaret Yu had known Ingrid Halverson for 28 years. And certain kinds of looks across a room became, in certain kinds of company, evidence. She named the Literacy Initiative. She said a number that was, this year, 31% larger than last year, and the room made its small, warm sound of approval. And then she said, I'd like to invite up to the stage a woman who is making her first public appearance tonight in what I understand has been a long and difficult year. She's Forgive me, Vivian, you haven't told me how you'd like to be introduced. Vivian stood. She stood the way a woman stands at the end of a long wait in a hospital corridor when the door is finally opened, not with relief, not with drama, but with a kind of small private readiness that she had been holding, quietly, for hours. You can just say my name, Margaret. Friends, said Margaret Yu, Vivian Cross. There was applause. It came, as applause did at galas, from the front tables first, a little uncertain, a little polite. And it traveled outward in a spreading ring, and it got warmer as it traveled, and it was warm by the time it reached the back. Ethan Cole did not applaud. He discovered, belatedly, that his hands were flat on the tablecloth, palm down, as if he were bracing for the room to tilt. He lifted them. He clapped, twice, very lightly. He stopped. Kara, beside him, was applauding with the absent, energetic enthusiasm of a woman who had not been told she was not supposed to. Vivian walked to the podium. She did not rush. She did not drag. She walked the way a woman walks when she has rehearsed the walk precisely 0 times because she has not known, until tonight, that she was going to take it. Her dress moved around her like something that had been poured. Adrian's hand, briefly, touched the small of her back as she stepped away. A last, small, grounding thing, and then was gone, and she was alone. And the steps up to the platform were 6, and then 3, and then none, and then she was behind the podium. The microphone was too low. It was always too low at these things. Someone had set it for Margaret. Vivian adjusted it without hurry, with the small, practiced motion of a woman who had adjusted a great many microphones over a great many years, back when she had been, briefly, an assistant curator at a museum and had stood at podiums speaking about 19th century American landscape paintings to rooms of donors who had pretended to listen. She set her clutch on the shelf below the podium. She took out one folded piece of cream-colored paper. She did not open it. She looked out at the room. The room, which had been warming toward her, shifted. Nobody could have described how. A shift the way the temperature in a hallway shifts when a door opens at the other end of it. People stopped turning their water glasses in their hands. One man near table 12, a real estate attorney who had represented Ethan Cole on 3 separate matters in the last 4 years, found himself, with no memory of having done it, sitting up straighter in his chair. "Good evening." Her voice was not loud. "I want to thank Margaret and the committee for letting me speak tonight. I wasn't on your program. I know I wasn't on your program. I know you rearranged things, Margaret, and I know what rearranging things costs, and I will find a way to make it up to you, I promise." Margaret, from her seat at the front table, inclined her head very slightly. Her eyes were, Vivian saw, wet. Margaret Yu had buried a husband 3 years ago, and there were certain walks by certain women that Margaret, these days, watched with particular attention. "I'm not going to give a speech." A small rustle through the room. Someone, at table 9, laughed. A quick, nervous, surprised laugh, and clipped it off. "I don't have one to give, and I do a bad job of it, and I'm not here to do bad jobs of things anymore. I'm 40 years old. I'm done with bad jobs." She unfolded the piece of paper on the podium. She did not read from it. She simply wanted something to look down at from time to time, so her hands would have somewhere to go. "A year ago, almost to the week, I was not well. I want to be honest about that because there's a version of tonight where I stand up here and pretend that I have been fine the entire time. And that version is a lie, and I have had enough of lies, mine and other people's. I was not well. I had lost a pregnancy in the summer, and I had lost, it turned out, a marriage in the same season, and I had not understood at the time that the 2 things were related. I do now. I want to say that out loud, in this room, because there are women in this room. I can see at least 4 of them from here, who know exactly, with no further explanation from me, what I mean when I say, I did not understand at the time that the 2 things were related, and I want those women to know that they are not stupid for not having understood it. They are not slow. They are not— She paused. She glanced down at the paper. She had written one phrase on the paper. The phrase was, "They are not broken." She had written it at 4 in the afternoon today, in her kitchen, with Adrian's dog asleep under the table. They are not broken. Someone, at table 14, made a small sound. It was the sound of a woman who had been caught, without warning, in public. "I spent," Vivian said, "the last 6 months doing more or less 2 things. I did a lot of sleeping, and I read a lot of paperwork. And I want to tell you tonight a little bit about the paperwork because the paperwork turned out to be the more surprising of the 2. She paused. She let the pause be long. At table 6, Ethan Cole had stopped breathing. He had not noticed. His lungs would, in a few seconds, remind him. Kara, next to him, who had been watching Vivian's face with a strange, absorbing concentration, reached under the table and put her hand on his knee. It was not a wifely gesture. It was the gesture of a woman steadying something that was about to go over. Ethan felt the pressure of her hand without, for a moment, understanding what it was. "I'm not going to name names tonight." A murmur, small and disappointed and relieved all at once. "I want to. God, I want to. But there are reporters in this room, and there are lawyers in this room, and there are, I am told, people in this room whose business it is to handle reporters and lawyers, And all of those people have asked me, very politely, in the last 48 hours, to let them do their jobs. So I am going to let them do their jobs. I'm going to tell you, tonight, only a few general things, because I think you deserve to hear them from me, in this room, before you read them on Wednesday in a publication that many of you subscribe to, and some of you have sat on the board of, and one of you, I believe, tried to buy in 2019. Shiki? She smiled faintly. Ingrid Halverson at table 4 set down her knife. I'm going to tell you, first, that I was told, for the last 3 years of my marriage, that I was imagining things. I was told I was tired. I was told I was paranoid. I was told, once, in front of my own mother, that I was, quote, not well enough to make decisions about money. I was told these things by a person I trusted. I was told them by people that person paid. I was told them in quiet voices, in nice rooms, by people who had decided, somewhere along the way, that the easiest way to handle me was to convince me, gently, that I was the problem. She lifted her eyes. She looked for the first time directly across the room at table 6. Ethan, to his credit, did not look away. I was not the problem. She let the sentence sit there. I was not the problem, and I'd like to say that out loud, in a microphone, in a room this size, because I spent about 14 months of my life being unable to say it to myself in the mirror in my own bathroom. I was not the problem. I am not a hysterical woman. I am not a bitter woman. I am, tonight, a very calm woman, because I have had, in the last 6 months, an extraordinarily good lawyer and an extraordinarily patient forensic accountant and an extraordinarily private therapist. In that order, and between the three of them, I have been assembled, slowly, into a person who can stand at a microphone without her voice caught, just once. Without crying in front of you, which, I'll be honest, was the only real rehearsal I did today. A sound moved through the room that was not laughter and not applause. It was an exhale, 400 throats wide. The paperwork, though. She let the tone shift. The paperwork is going to be its own conversation. I'm not going to walk you through the paperwork tonight. I'm not going to name the company, or the shell companies under the company, or the 3 names that appear as signatories on the shell companies, and that are all, in a funny coincidence, the first names of men who golfed every other Sunday at a club I could not get into on my own membership. I'm not going to name the charity that was never a charity. I'm not going to name the consulting firm in the Caymans that billed coal equity 4 times a year for, quote, strategic advisory services, and that has, on closer inspection, exactly 1 employee. And he is 15 years old, and he is a high school junior in a town outside Nashville, and he is the son of a man who used to be the comptroller at... She stopped herself. I said I wasn't going to name names. Someone at table 11 laughed. It was a short, astonished, helpless laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had just watched a magician step, visibly, halfway into a box and then step out again. I'm not going to do any of that tonight. Ingrid Halverson is going to do that on Wednesday. I have had the privilege, over the last several weeks, of sitting across a kitchen table from Ingrid, and I want to tell you all, from the microphone, that she is not the monster some of you think she is. She is a reporter. That is her job. She has done her job better than anyone in this room has done their job in a very long time. I will be grateful to her for the rest of my life. She lifted the piece of cream-colored paper. She looked down at it. I want to say one last thing, and then I'm going to sit down and let Margaret have her podium back. The last thing is the hardest thing, so bear with me. The room bore with her. I wasn't going to come tonight. I want to tell you that honestly, because there's a version of this evening, there's a version of tonight, which is still being written in the minds of a lot of people here, I suspect, where I came tonight to make a scene, where I came to humiliate someone, where I came to be, quote, on the arm of a particular person in this room, in order to produce a particular effect on another particular person in this room. I want to tell you that is not what I came here to do. I'm not that interesting. I am not, I'm sorry to say, a woman who has spent the last 6 months plotting. I am a woman who has spent the last 6 months sleeping 9 hours a night and reading bank statements and learning, very slowly, how to cook eggs again, because I had forgotten. I want to be on the record as a woman who had forgotten how to cook an egg 6 months ago. I think that's important. I think that's the thing I want Wednesday's article to know about me, if Wednesday's article decides to be about me at all, which I hope very much it does not. She let the paper fall, lightly, to the podium. I came tonight, she said, because I wanted to see all of you. I wanted to look at your faces. I wanted you to look at mine. I wanted to be in a room with the people who, a year ago, when I was not well, stopped returning my calls. I don't hate you for that. I do not. I have, on my very worst days, understood it. You had your lives. You had your marriages. You had your businesses. You had, very specifically, your relationships with a man whose name I have decided not to say tonight. And those relationships were expensive, and calling me back would have cost you. I understand that. I forgive that. I do, actually. I've had the time. She looked out at them. But I want you to know that I saw you. I saw you not calling. I saw you crossing the street on Madison in February. I saw you, Sloan. And I love you, Sloan. I really do. I saw you change your lunch reservation on the 12th of March because your husband told you I had made a reservation at the same place, and your husband was lying because I was in bed that day and had not made any reservations anywhere. I saw you. I am not angry. I am a little amused. And I am telling you now, for the record, that I do not need a call anymore. I do not need a lunch. I do not need a coffee. I would rather, going forward, that the people who did not show up for me not show up for me, if that's all right. I think we'll all be more comfortable. At table 8, Sloan Marchetti's eyes spilled over. She did not wipe them. Her husband reached for her hand under the table, and Sloan, with a small, sharp motion, pulled her hand away. One last thing, really the last. I promise. Vivian's voice, which had held for the whole speech, softened now. It softened in the way a voice softens when the speaker has come, at last, to the part she rehearsed in her own head, and cannot quite believe she is now saying in air. There is a man at table 1, she said, who many of you know by reputation. I'm not going to introduce him. Most of you have already introduced yourselves to him tonight, in small ways through other people by asking around. That's fine. That's the grown-up version of gossip, and I'm not above it either. A small, careful laugh from the floor. Adrian did not ask me to come tonight. He did not suggest it. He did not plan it. He did not, for the record, put me in this dress. I put me in this dress. I put me in this dress after I put me in 6 other dresses, and then I put me in this one, and I stood in front of my mirror and I said, out loud, to my own reflection. And my mother was in the next room, and she will confirm this. I said, Vivian Cross, you are going to walk into that room like a woman who knows what she is worth. She paused. That was the sentence. It's not a very original sentence. I'd be embarrassed if it weren't true. She looked for the first time that evening directly at Adrian Volkov, and he looked back at her, and across the room the cameraman from the Tribune, who had been instructed, specifically, by his editor, do not take a photograph of the Volkov man, not even one. Do not make me have this conversation with legal on Monday. Lifted his camera anyway, and took one photograph, and then sensibly deleted it on the spot. Adrian, Vivian said into the microphone without looking away from him, did not save me. I want to tell you all that because I have been, for the last 6 weeks, reading a very particular story about myself in certain places. And the story is that I am a rescued woman, and the man at table 1 is my rescuer. I want to tell you that is not what happened. What happened is that I saved myself. I saved myself 95% of the way. And then at 95% when I was tired, and when I needed a lawyer who did not have a relationship with anyone at Cole Equity, and when I needed specifically to know that my mother's apartment was not going to be bought, very quietly, by a shell company in May, I called a man whose number I had been given once, a long time ago, by a friend of my father's. I called him. He answered. He was, I will tell you, extremely suspicious. He asked me 11 questions. He called me back 3 days later. He has been a friend, and only a friend, for the first 4 months of our acquaintance, I think is the word, and he has been something more than that only since the beginning of October, and I want that on the record, in this microphone, tonight, because I am not ashamed of it. I am not a woman being rescued. I am a woman who has fallen in love, slowly and badly, and against her own better judgment, with a person who, for reasons I'm still learning, loves me back. Charles, only goes so much. She took a breath. That is all. I'm going to stop now. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy your dinner. The Literacy Initiative is a very good cause. Give generously." She stepped away from the podium. The applause did not start for a beat because no one in the room knew exactly how to start it. It was not an applause-shaped speech. It had not had the rhythms. It had not built. It had not landed on a line anyone could hold on to. It had simply ended the way a confession ends, with the speaker gathering up her piece of paper and walking off. Margaret Yu started it. Margaret Yu stood up at her front table, and she began to clap, slowly and deliberately, and she kept clapping, and at the second beat, Noor Rahimi Fletcher stood, and at the third beat, Desmond Eklund stood, and then, in a long, uneven wave that began at the front and moved outward the way silence had moved earlier in the evening, the room rose. Not everyone. Ethan Cole did not rise. He could not. His knees, he would realize later, had locked. Kara, beside him, rose halfway and then sat down again, uncertain, confused, her hand still on his thigh. Sloane Marchetti did not rise. She had her face in her hands. A man at table 11, one of the Halden-adjacent ones, a banker whose last name Vivian had never bothered to learn, rose and then, a beat later, sat back down. And then, a beat after that, rose again, because his wife had hissed something at him under her breath. Preston Halden was not in the room. Preston Halden had in fact left the gala 18 minutes ago, through a service entrance. His driver had already been waiting. Vivian walked back to table 1 through a room of standing people. She did not look at the standing people. She looked at Adrian. Adrian was standing too. Everyone at table 1 was standing. Desmond Eklund was clapping with both hands raised, which was something Desmond had not done since 1996. When Vivian reached her seat, Adrian did not sit down first. He waited. He pulled her chair for her. She sat. He sat. The applause went on, a little too long, the way applause does when a room has not yet decided what it thought. Adrian leaned very slightly toward her ear. "You all right?" "I don't know yet." "That was a very long speech." "I thought it was going to be short." "So did I." "Was it bad?" "Vivian." "Was it bad, Adrian?" "It was good. It was—" "Vivian." "It was good. Breathe." "I'm breathing." "Breathe out." She breathed out. Desmond Eklund, on her other side, had sat down and was blowing his nose into a white handkerchief with the unself-consciousness of a man who had stopped caring, 30 years ago, what a ballroom thought of him. He folded the handkerchief. He tucked it away. He reached over and patted her hand. "Miss Cross." "Yes, Desmond?" "I'd like to send you a contract on Monday." "For what?" "For whatever you decide to write." "Desmond, I told you, I'm not ready. I'm not going to send you a contract for a book. I'm going to send you a contract for one short essay, 2,000 words. Any topic, any deadline. The deadline can be never. The contract will sit in your drawer until you are ready. And when you are ready, if you are ever ready, you will have already a contract and a home and an editor, and you will not have to go looking. I am taking that errand off your to-do list. That is my gift." She looked at him. "Desmond." "Miss Cross." "Thank you." "Not at all." There. At table 6, Ethan Cole was sitting very still. The applause had died. The room had, with the slow, clumsy grace of 400 people pretending to move on, moved on. Waiters had begun to arrive with the third course. A string of side conversations had started back up, a little louder than before, because people were covering their own reactions, covering their friends' reactions, covering the fact that at table 12, 2 women who had been there as each other's dates were now, quietly, holding hands under the table for reasons neither of them would ever explain. Ethan's phone in his pocket was buzzing again. He did not take it out. Kara was watching him. She had moved her hand off his thigh at some point during the speech. He had not noticed exactly when. "Ethan." "Yeah." "Did you know about the pregnancy?" The question came from a place in her that he had not previously identified. "Kara." "Did you know?" "Kara, this isn't the—" "Did you know she was pregnant, Ethan?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "Okay." "Kara." "Okay." "Kara, listen. I need to go use the bathroom, Ethan." "Kara, I'll be back." She was already standing. Her napkin slid off her lap and onto the floor. She did not pick it up. She walked in the pale blue Valentino that had cost her husband $11,000 out of the ballroom, and she did not look back, and she did not return for the third course. Ethan sat alone at his table, and the seat beside him was empty, and the seat across from him, Pembroke's seat, was being refilled with genial chatter about somebody's house in the Hamptons, and somewhere behind him Ingrid Halverson was eating her soup, and across the room his ex-wife was laughing, softly, at something an old publisher had said, and Adrian Volkov was watching Ethan with the patient, unhurried attention of a man who had all night. His phone buzzed again. This time, he took it out. It was Marty. The message was 4 words. "We need to talk." Underneath, a second message, 15 seconds later. "Not Monday. Now." Ethan did not stand up. Not yet. He had enough presence of mind still to remember Marty's instructions from the lounge. He was supposed to stay. He was supposed to eat. He was supposed to not leave. He typed back under the tablecloth with one thumb. 45 minutes, lounge, same one. Marty's reply came in 4 seconds. "I'm in a cab. I'll be there in 12. Ethan put the phone away. He looked one more time across the room at the woman in the black gown with the diamonds at her throat, who had told 400 people, in a voice she had never, in 17 years of marriage, used with him, that she was not broken, and that she had not been rescued, and that she had saved herself 95% of the way. The thought came to him fully formed and unflattering, in the way the truest thoughts sometimes do, uninvited. That in 17 years he had never once asked her to save herself of anything, because he had never once noticed that she was drowning. He picked up his wine glass. He drank from it. The wine tasted, for the first time that evening, like wine. He set the glass down. He folded his napkin. He stood, slowly, and walked, as calmly as he could manage, toward the exit of the ballroom. And at table 1, Vivian Cross did not turn her head to watch him go, but Adrian Volkov did, just for a second, the way a man watches a small, wounded animal leave a clearing, noting the direction, noting the limp, filing it away. The corridor outside the ballroom was cooler than the room inside, and quieter, and Ethan Cole felt, as the door side shut behind him, like a man stepping out of a pressurized cabin. The carpet was thick enough to eat his footsteps. He could hear, through the walls, the low thrum of the gala, 400 people breathing, murmuring, clinking silverware. And the sound was already softening, already receding. The way the sound of a party recedes from a man walking toward his car in a parking lot after he has been quietly asked to leave. He made it to the VIP lounge before Marty did. He sat on the same velvet ottoman. He looked at his own shoes for 11 minutes without really seeing them. The door opened. Marty Rosenthal came in the way Marty always came into a room, sideways, with his eyes already scanning, and the first thing Marty did was close the door behind him and flip the lock. He had come straight from his apartment. He was wearing jeans. Marty Rosenthal had not been seen in jeans in this building, possibly ever, and the jeans were, in their way, the most alarming thing Ethan had seen all evening. "Jesus, Marty. Don't Jesus me. You're in jeans. Ethan, look at me." Ethan looked. Marty was 57 years old, 2 inches shorter than Ethan, with the kind of softening around the jaw that good tailoring was supposed to hide and usually didn't. His hair was thin. His eyes, behind the rimless glasses, were the eyes of a man who had been awake for a long time and was not yet planning to go to sleep. "I need you to tell me," Marty said, sitting down on the small velvet chair opposite the ottoman, "what you know. Not what you've heard, not what you think, what you know." "About what?" "Ethan, what did she say in there?" "You weren't—" "I got the text from Brant's assistant. She live-texted me the whole thing. I have the last 10 minutes on my phone. I want to hear it from you." Ethan told him. Telling it made it worse. Telling it made it real. The speech, which had happened to him only 40 minutes ago, had already begun in his head to recede into a kind of feverish gauze. She said, "I was told I was tired," she said. "I was told I was paranoid." She said, "I was not the problem." And saying the words out loud to Marty, in the cool, empty lounge, pinned them back down into the world. Marty listened without moving. Marty listened the way he had once, Ethan remembered. Listened to a story Ethan had told him about a deal in Hong Kong, which had turned out to be a story that needed listening to very, very carefully. When Ethan was done, Marty sat for a long moment, and then he took off his glasses, and he pinched the bridge of his nose, and he said quietly, "Ethan, you are fucked." "Marty, I'm not done." "Marty, you are fucked. You are very fucked. You are fucked in, I would say, 4 different directions, and I want to walk you through the 4 directions before you say anything else, because I don't think you understand yet the fullness of the fucking." Ethan didn't say anything. Direction 1. Halverson's article. The Halverson article is going to run on Wednesday. You cannot stop the Halverson article. I have been trying, in my gentle way, for 2 weeks, and I want to tell you, Ethan, that the Halverson piece is already at legal. It is already past legal. The piece is done. What Halverson told you tonight, the Monday call, the weekend to prepare, that is not a courtesy to you. That is her lawyer checking a box. She needs to go on the record with you having been asked for comment. That is the last box. After that box, the piece prints. What's the piece? The piece is Halden, Ethan. The piece is Halden, and the piece is the Caymans, and the piece is the consulting firm with the 15-year-old, and the piece is, I'm going to say this carefully, the piece is a name I did not know was in the piece until this afternoon, which I learned about when I got a call at 4:07 from a clerk I used to play poker with, who was calling me as a favor, because the name is a name that appears, Ethan, in a sealed filing in the Southern District, which was unsealed at 3:15 this afternoon. Marty, what name? Your name. What? Your name, Ethan, not Cole Equity, not some shell. Your name. In a filing, unsealed at 3:15. Halverson has had it since, I would guess, 3:20. Ethan sat very still. Marty. Yeah. Unsealed means what? Unsealed means the government is done being quiet about what it has. What does it have? Ethan, I'm your lawyer. I'm not a prosecutor. I don't have what they have. What I can tell you is that a filing got unsealed, and the filing named you, and the filing is, per my clerk, related to the Halden matter. You can do the math on the rest. Ethan opened his mouth. He closed it. He said in a voice that didn't sound like his, "Okay. Direction 2. Direction 2, Vivian. She said she wasn't. She said a lot of things in that speech, Ethan, and I'm going to give her credit. She said them with a lot of care. But let me tell you what she really said. Okay, let me translate, because I don't think you were listening with the right ears. She said tonight, in front of 400 people, including 2 reporters, and the wife of the Attorney General, and the board chair of the bank that holds your paper on the Tribeca buildings, she said, for the record, and it will be on the record, because Brandt's assistant has the audio, that for the last 3 years of your marriage, you told her she was paranoid, that you had people working for you tell her the same thing, that you told her mother she was unable to make financial decisions, and that you are currently being investigated. She did not say you are being investigated. She said there are lawyers and forensic accountants and reporters in the room working on it. That's her saying it without saying it. That is her opening the door, Ethan, and walking through it backwards so she can't be blamed for the draft. Marty, she has what her accountant gave her, which is a lot. And she has what Volkov's people gave her, which I would assume is more. And she has, Ethan, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear. She has you on tape. Ethan's head came up. What? On tape. What tape? I don't know what tape. I know there is a tape. My clerk didn't know what was on it. He knew that the filing referenced audio recordings. Plural. He knew they were, quote, recorded by the affiant in the course of her marriage, which means she wouldn't. She did. Marty, she wouldn't have. Ethan. Vivian's not the kind of woman who, Ethan, she fucking did. And I would like you to sit with that for about 15 seconds before you tell me again what kind of woman you think your ex-wife is. Okay? Because I think we have established tonight that you may not be the foremost expert on what kind of woman your ex-wife is. Ethan put his face in his hands. Direction 3. I can't, Marty. I can't do 4 of these. Direction 3, Ethan. Focus. Direction 3 is Volkov. Ethan did not lift his face. Volkov, Marty said, is not right now the problem you think he is. Volkov right now is doing what Volkov does, which is to stand next to your ex-wife and look expensive. Volkov is a reputational problem. He is not, For tonight, an operational problem. For tonight. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Because the reason Volkov is not, for tonight, an operational problem, is that Volkov has already operated. I am almost certain of it. The mayor doesn't cancel on you an hour before the gala because he has a cold. The mayor cancels on you because someone, at some point today, picked up a phone, and the person holding that phone was not Volkov himself, but the call came, in a sense I will not try to articulate in writing or in an ottoman-to-chair conversation, from Volkov. I want you to understand that. I want you to understand that Volkov's hands are clean in this, all the way clean, and are going to stay all the way clean. And that is precisely why he is dangerous, because when Halverson's piece runs, and when the SDNY filing hits the news, and when your board calls an emergency meeting on Thursday, Volkov will not be mentioned in any of it. Not once. Not by anyone. He will be in the negative space of the story, and the negative space will do more to you than the story itself. Dim buzz. Marty, direction 4. Marty, please. Direction 4 is Kara. Kara's fine. Kara is not fine. Kara is... Ethan, where is Kara? Ethan looked up. She's in the bathroom. For how long? Ethan opened his phone. He looked at the time. He had to count on his fingers like a child. 41 minutes. Yeah. 41 minutes. Yeah. Marty, she's not... Ethan, open Find My Phone. Ethan opened Find My Phone. He kept his thumb steady. Barely. The phone loaded. It loaded slowly because the Halvertons' Wi-Fi was overloaded with 400 guests streaming to their assistants. It loaded. Kara's phone was not in the Halverton. Kara's phone was, per Find My Phone, in a moving vehicle on the FDR, heading north. Marty. Yeah. Kara's in a cab. I see that. Kara's not... Ethan, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Kara's mother is a paralegal. I did not know this until yesterday. Kara's mother is a paralegal in Queens. Her firm does, among other things, prenuptial review. I did not do Kara's prenup. Do you remember why I didn't do Kara's prenup? Because I said I'd handle it. Right. Because I said, right. I used Peck and Ravel. I know, Ethan, I know. Because Kara's mother called me this afternoon at 4:30, ostensibly as a professional courtesy, to tell me that Peck and Ravel's draft contains a paragraph in Schedule C that is, and I quote her, not enforceable in the state of New York and has not been enforceable since 2017. That conversation, Ethan, started at 4:30. That conversation went on for 16 minutes. I hung up the phone at 4:46, and I want you to know, for the record, that I went outside and I walked around the block once, because I needed to calm down before I called you, and I had not decided by the time I came back inside whether I was going to call you tonight or whether I was going to let you have your dinner. Ethan stared at him. You weren't going to tell me. I hadn't decided. Why would you not? Because, Ethan, when a man's lawyer gets a phone call on a Saturday afternoon from the mother of the man's second wife, letting the lawyer know, as a professional courtesy, that the second wife's prenup has a hole in it that you could drive a truck through, that phone call is not a courtesy call. That phone call is a shot across the bow. That phone call is Kara's mother telling me, in the nicest possible way, that Kara is about to file for divorce, and that Kara has been planning to file for divorce for long enough to have had her mother read the prenup, and that Kara's mother would like me to know, professional to professional, that there is no point in my trying to negotiate, because they know what they have, and what they have is half of everything. Kara wouldn't, or Kara would. Kara is, she's 26, Marty. She's, Ethan, listen to yourself. Ethan stopped. Listen to yourself, Marty said again, softer. You just said Kara is 26. Like that means she couldn't, like that means she wouldn't have the nerve. Ethan, where did you learn that about 26-year-olds? When did you learn that? Was it when you were 26 and decided you were going to build a company? Or was it somewhere later when you started to need to believe that the young women around you were simpler than they actually were? Marty, I'm not lecturing you. It kind of sounds like you are. I'm not. I'm telling you what your ex-wife told the whole room tonight, which is that you have spent a long time convincing yourself that the women in your life didn't see what they saw. Kara saw Ethan. Kara has been seen for a while. Kara saw tonight, probably, the last thing she needed to see. Kara is in a cab going north, which means she is going to her mother's apartment in Astoria, which means she will, by Monday morning, have a lawyer, and the lawyer will not be a man I have ever had a drink with. Ethan leaned back on the ottoman. He looked up at the ceiling. The ceiling had a small, ornate molding painted cream, and one tiny section of the molding in the corner above the door had chipped. He focused on the chip. He focused on the chip until the chip blurred. Marty? Yeah? How bad is this? On a scale of 1 to 10? Yes. Ethan, I've been practicing law for 22 years. I do not use the scale of 1 to 10 because I have found that when a man asks me to put it on a scale, he is usually looking to negotiate his own number down. I am not going to negotiate with you. I will tell you instead what I am going to do and what I need from you, and then I'm going to leave because I have, by the way, a daughter's recital in the morning, and I would like to be upright for it. Tell me, Monday morning, 9 a.m., I am going to call Halverson. I am going to tell her that our comment is no comment at this time, pending review. She is going to print that. She will be polite about it. She will, in fact, use the phrase did not respond to a request for comment, because that's a better line than declined to comment, and she is a professional, and she will choose the better line. The Halverson piece prints Wednesday. I lose the company. You lose the company. All of it. Most of it. There are pieces, Chang Holdings, the Nevada thing, that you will retain because they are cleanly papered and because, frankly, nobody wants them. The rest, yes. The Southern District. The Southern District, I do not yet know. I need to read the filing. My clerk is sending me a copy by 11 tonight, not officially. I will read it. I will call you tomorrow. It is possible, Ethan, that we are looking at a meeting in a federal building in a suit by Wednesday. It is possible we are looking at surrender. It is possible we are looking at charges. I am not going to tell you what is likely because I do not yet know. Vivian, you do not contact under any circumstances, even if she contacts you, which she will not. She is being advised by someone very good. She is not going to call you, Ethan. I want that clear. She has a lawyer I know a little, and she has a forensic accountant I know very well, and she has, I will tell you this because it is relevant, she has Volkov's corporate counsel quietly reviewing her papers, which means that if she wants you in prison, Ethan, she has the resources to get you there. She doesn't want me in prison. How do you know? Because he stopped. He thought about the speech. He thought about her voice when she had said, I am not a bitter woman. He thought about her sitting across from her mother 6 months ago with her hands shaking too hard to sign a form. Because she said so. She said, Marty corrected, that she was not going to name names tonight because she had been asked politely to let other people do their jobs. She did not say she did not want you in prison, Ethan. She said other people were going to decide that, not her. There's a difference. I want you to hold that difference in your head when you're making decisions in the next 48 hours. Because you have, for the whole of your marriage, been hearing what Vivian said and understanding something less than she meant. Do not do that again this weekend. It will cost you. Ethan closed his eyes. Okay. Kara. What about her? You do not contact Kara either. You do not call her. You do not text her. You do not show up at her mother's apartment. You do not send flowers. You do not send a card. You do not, for the love of God, tweet anything. You will be tempted around 2 a.m. to tweet something. I am telling you now, in a room with a locked door, do not tweet. I wasn't going to tweet. Good. Keep not going to tweet. Marty. Yeah. What do I do right now? Marty looked at him. Marty, who had, across 11 years, seen Ethan Cole at a great many angles, had seen him through a midlife gym phase, had seen him through the Hong Kong deal, had seen him laugh too loud at a Christmas party and say something unforgivable to a hedge fund manager's wife, and then charm his way back into that hedge fund manager's life within 90 days, looked at him now, on the ottoman, in a tuxedo, at 41, without the company that was about to be taken from him, and without the wife who was currently in a cab on the FDR. And Marty did a thing Marty almost never did. He softened. Ethan. Yeah. Go home. What? Now? Now. Don't go back in the ballroom. Don't say goodbye to anyone. Don't ask for the car. Take a cab. Use a regular cab. Not your driver. I want your driver at the front door looking like he's waiting for you until 1 a.m., because that will buy you some time in the morning papers. Go to your apartment. Pour yourself a glass of water. Not a drink. Water. Go to bed. Do not get on your phone. Sleep as much as you can. Tomorrow, we work. Okay. Ethan. Yeah. Look at me. Ethan looked. You did this. Marty, you did this? I'm saying it once. I'm not going to say it again, because I am not going to be the lawyer who lectures his client, but I am going to say it once, tonight, in a locked room, as a man who has known you for 11 years. You did this. Vivian did not do this to you. Volkov did not do this to you. Halverson did not do this to you. Halden? Halden is about to do some of this to you, but Halden only had the ability to do this to you because you, 18 months ago, chose to do it the sideways way. And I told you, Ethan, I told you at the Four Seasons in Miami in February, with the view of the water, I told you, do not do it sideways. And you looked at me and you said, and this is a quote, I remember, no. Let me finish. You said, and this is a quote, Marty, you worry too much, I've got this. Those were your words. You said I've got this about a transaction that is going to, by Wednesday, put your name in the Federal Register. I am saying this to you tonight, Ethan, because if I do not say it to you tonight, I will not have another clean chance to say it. After tonight, I am your lawyer, and after tonight, I am going to defend you. And I am going to defend you well, because that is my job. And I am good at my job. But tonight, before I start defending you, I want the record to show between us in this room that I told you. I told you. Okay? Okay? Okay. Marty stood. He put his glasses back on. He adjusted his jeans uselessly at the waistband. Get up, Ethan. Yeah. Get up. Ethan got up. At the door, Marty paused with his hand on the lock. He looked back. Ethan. Yeah. Did you love her? Who? Either one. Ethan looked at the floor. He looked at his shoes. He looked at the cream-colored chip in the molding that he had stared at for the whole conversation. I don't know, he said. Yeah, Marty said. I know. He unlocked the door. He went out. Back inside the ballroom, Vivian had eaten 3 bites of her entree, which was more than she had eaten at any meal in the preceding 8 days, and Adrian had noticed without saying anything, and Desmond Eklund had been telling her, in the small, delighted voice of a man about to escape back to his apartment and call his wife, about a summer he had spent in 1978 in a cottage outside Cork, which had somehow led, by a route only Desmond could trace, to a story about a pig. Vivian was listening. She was also, without appearing to, aware that Ethan had left the building. She was aware because the small red light on the sconce nearest the main exit had flicked very briefly, twice, and then gone solid. A signal, agreed on in advance with a man named Wiley, who worked for Adrian, and who was currently in the service corridor with an earpiece and a very boring novel. 2 flicks meant the subject has exited the premises via the main entrance. 1 flick would have meant he had gone out the service door. 3 flicks would have meant he had gone upstairs, to the suites, which would have required a different conversation. 2 flicks. Fine. Normal. Expected. She did not turn her head toward the sconce. She laughed, lightly, at Desmond's pig, which had climaxed in the pig being found, alive and complaining, inside a parked Morris Minor. Adrian's hand, under the table, found her knee and stayed there for 1 beat and lifted. You need air, he said quietly, only to her. Yes. Terrace? Terrace. She set her napkin down. She excused herself to Desmond, who rose in the reflexive 40-years-ago way of an old man around a lady, and she and Adrian walked in no particular hurry through the ballroom and out onto the long limestone terrace that ran the length of the 2nd floor of the Halverton, overlooking the avenue. It had stopped raining. The air was cold in the way that city air is cold in early November, cold around the edges, warm in pockets where the building's heat leaked out, smelling of wet asphalt and bus exhaust, and faintly of something sweet that a nearby restaurant was burning for the last round of desserts. The terrace was empty except for one man 50 feet away who was smoking and who saw them and who very politely put out his cigarette and went back inside. Vivian walked to the railing. She put both hands on the cold stone. She leaned her weight on it. She closed her eyes. Adrian stood beside her. He did not touch her. He had learned over the last 6 months when not to touch her. "Well," she said after a while. "Well, I said too much." "No, you didn't." "I said, Adrian, I said I loved you. I noticed. In front of 400 people. I noticed that too. I was going to, the plan was not that. The plan was absolutely not that. I know. You are being a very grown-up about it. I'm trying." She opened her eyes. She looked over at him. His face, in the light coming up from the avenue, looked older than it usually did. Or not older. More tired. He had, she realized, been on for 3 straight hours. For him, that was like running a marathon. Adrian Volkov did not spend 3 hours being watched by 400 strangers. He spent 3 hours most days in rooms with 3 or 4 people, and he spent those 3 hours being, by a wide margin, the most silent person there. "Adrian?" "Yeah." "Did you—" She stopped. She tried again. "Was it true?" "Was what true?" "What I said. About you. About you being only a friend for 4 months. About us starting in October. About me not being rescued." He was quiet. "Adrian." "It was true," he said. "You know it was true. I was there for all of it." "Then why are you—" "I'm not." "You're quiet." "I'm thinking." "About what?" "About the fact," he said slowly, "that you told 400 people, including at least one reporter and the wife of an attorney general, that you are in love with me." "Yes." "Yeah." "I shouldn't have." "I didn't say that." "I shouldn't have, Adrian. You have reasons. You have reasons you don't want your name in those kinds of sentences in those kinds of rooms. I know that. I have known that since October. I have known that since September, actually. I had no right to— Vivian, to put your name in a room like that without asking you. I had no right. Vivian. She stopped. He turned to face her. He took her hands, both of them, off the railing, and he held them in his own, lightly, not tight. His hands were warm. They were always warm. She had once, lying next to him in a hotel room in Milan, put her cold feet against his calves, and he had not flinched, had only kept reading his book. And she had thought, that night, that this was a person whose body temperature had never, in his entire life, been regulated by his fear. "Listen to me," he said. "Okay. I do not care." "Adrian, I do not care, Vivian. About the rooms. About the reporters. About my name in sentences. I have spent a long time, a very long time, longer than you have been alive, arguably, keeping my name out of sentences in rooms like that. And I have been very good at it, and I'm going to continue to be good at it, and none of that tonight, in any way, is going to be hurt by what you said on that stage. Do you understand me? Do you understand me? I understand you. Good. Now the other thing. What other thing? The other thing, Vivian, is that you just told 400 people you love me. Yes. And I have not tonight told you the same." She opened her mouth. She closed it. "I'm going to tell you now. Adrian. Vivian. You don't have to, I'm aware I don't have to. Please be quiet. I'm not good at this part." "Okay." He was quiet for a moment. He was, she saw, actually struggling. She had never, in 6 months, watched Adrian Volkov struggle for a sentence. He struggled the way a professional athlete struggles with a minor, unfamiliar muscle, with a mild, embarrassed impatience, looking for the right grip. "When you called me," he said finally, "in April, you remember the day?" "I remember. You sounded, on the phone, like a person who had spent a long time rehearsing what to say, because you were afraid that if you didn't rehearse it, you would cry." "Yes." "You didn't cry." "No. You said, Mr. Volkov, my name is Vivian Cole. My father was Charles Cross. I was told once by your associate, Mr. Bolotin, that I could call if I ever needed to, and I am calling. I remember. You said it in one breath. I practiced. I know you did. It took me 40 minutes to pick up the phone. I know. How do you know? Because Bulletin had left the number at your mother's apartment 6 months earlier, Vivian, and I had asked him once a month, very quietly, whether it had been used, and the answer had been no, for 6 months. And the day you called, Bulletin called me at home. And he said, and I quote him, she finally called Adrian. And I said, how did she sound? And he said, scared, but not, not the scared we worry about. And I said, good, send her to me. Vivian was very still. Yes.
You had been, yes?
For 6 months.
Yes?
Adrian. I'm not, he stopped. He almost laughed at himself. I'm not telling you this to make a point. I'm telling you this because I want you tonight to understand something. I did not fall in love with you in October. I fell in love with you on the phone in April. I did not tell you that in April or in May or in June because I am not a stupid man and I know what a person sounds like when they are being rescued, and I did not want to be for you, the man who... He made a vague gesture with his free hand, the closest Adrian Volkov ever came to a fumble. The kind of man you described on stage tonight, the rescuer. I did not want to be that. I waited. I waited until you, in a kitchen in August, told me that you had started cooking eggs again. And I thought, okay. Now she is not drowning. Now she is a woman in a kitchen who has learned again how to cook an egg, and now, and only now, am I allowed to love her out loud. Vivian's eyes, which had been steady for the entire evening, filled. Adrian. Yeah, I love you. I know. I'm going to cry, okay? I'm going to cry on the terrace of the Halverton Hotel in a $10,000 dress. Okay? Don't let anyone see. I won't. He turned her gently so that her face was into the stone wall of the building and her back was to the terrace, and he stepped close behind her, and he put one hand flat between her shoulder blades, and she cried quietly for perhaps 30 seconds, without sound, the way a woman cries when she has done the crying alone in bathrooms for half a year and has finally arrived, at 40, on a terrace in November, on the other side of the worst of it. When she was done, she wiped carefully under her eyes with the pad of her ring finger, and she turned back around. Her makeup, by a miracle, had held. All right, she said. All right. Let's go back in. One more minute. One more minute. They stood at the railing, not touching, and watched the avenue. Down below, a yellow cab turned the corner at 57th, a little too fast, and its tires hissed on the wet asphalt. A man in a wool coat was walking a small, dignified dog. The dog stopped at a fire hydrant. The dog considered the fire hydrant. The dog did not, in the end, use the fire hydrant, and the dog and the man in the wool coat moved on. Vivian? Yeah. I want you to know something. Okay? Tomorrow, Adrian said, is going to be a long day. I know. And Monday is going to be a longer one. I know. The piece on Wednesday, the filing, the Kara thing, which you don't know about yet, but which Bolotin just texted me about in the corridor. There's a Kara thing? There's a Kara thing. Is it good? It's... Vivian, it is not bad. Is she leaving him? It looks that way. Tonight? Tonight. Vivian was quiet. Then very softly she said, good for her. Yeah, I mean that. I know you do. I'm not going to call her. No. But if she ever... I know. Okay. Yeah. They stood in the cold, the city moving below them, the gala humming behind them, and at some point, neither of them could have said when, Adrian's little finger had hooked very lightly around Vivian's little finger on the railing, which was, for him, the approximate equivalent of a public declaration, and she let it stay there, and the wet, cold stone was under her palm, and behind her, inside the warm ballroom, the string quartet was playing something that had no name she could retrieve, but that sounded now like a song she had always known. The cold on the terrace did what cold does. It reminded them, eventually, that they had bodies. Vivian stepped back from the railing. Adrian unhooked his little finger from hers. They went inside without speaking, the way two people go inside when they have already said the thing they needed to say, and the string quartet had moved on to something livelier, and Desmond Eklund was telling a new story at table 1. This one about an editor he had fired in 1984 for stealing office supplies. And it was Vivian saw as she sat down, a story Desmond was telling mostly for the benefit of an empty chair, her chair, that he had been afraid for 30 seconds would not come back. She sat. She smiled at him. He smiled back, and something in him visibly unclenched, and he went on with the office supplies story, and she put her hand on his forearm, briefly, and he did not react to it, but she felt, under his sleeve, his pulse slow back down. The rest of the gala, in the end, was the rest of the gala. There was a third course. There was coffee. There was a small, uncomfortable speech by a trustee whose name Vivian had forgotten before he finished saying it. There was a closing bid for a silent auction in which a vacation house in Maine went for $47,000 to a woman who Vivian was almost certain had a vacation house in Maine already. Margaret Yu came by table 1 twice, once officially to thank Adrian for Brace Holdings' gift, and once unofficially to squeeze Vivian's hand under the table in the specific way Margaret squeezed hands, and to say, in a voice lower than the string quartet, "Call me Tuesday, dear, not Monday. Mondays are bad for me," and then to drift back to her own table before anyone could read anything into it. At 11:15, people began to leave. It was earlier than they usually left, and it was earlier than Vivian had expected, and she understood the way one understood weather. Why? The room had had its headline. The room had had more than its headline. The room wanted to go home and make phone calls. The room wanted to pay its nannies. The room wanted to be the first, at brunch tomorrow, to have been there. Vivian watched them go. She did not try to say goodbye to most of them. A few came by the table, so Noor again with a small, real embrace. Margaret Hollis. Brant, who kissed the air next to both of Vivian's cheeks and said, very low, "I'll write the thing you want me to write, sweetheart, I promise." But most left without a stop at table 1, and Vivian understood that too. Ingrid Halverson was one of the people who did stop. She stopped not at table 1, but in the aisle beside it, and she did not sit. Her wife, a small, tired-looking woman with a beautiful silver braid, stood a polite 2 paces back, as if she had done this 1,000 times and knew the choreography. "Miss Cross? Ingrid? I want to say one thing. All right, I haven't sourced anything to you. I haven't sourced anything to anyone at this table. Tonight is not in the piece. What you said tonight is not in the piece. I want you to know that. Thank you? The piece was finished before tonight. I know. I wanted you to know I know you know." Yes, Ingrid nodded. She was a short woman, Vivian realized, now that she was standing next to her, shorter than Vivian by 3 inches at least. And Vivian had the strange, small revelation that this was a woman whom men had, for decades, underestimated because of her size, and that this had probably been, over a long career, the single greatest professional gift of her life. "Good evening, Mr. Volkov," Ingrid said. "Ms. Halverson. I hope you enjoy the piece. I'll read it twice." "Good man!" Ingrid inclined her head once to Vivian, and she and her wife drifted out of the ballroom. And that was the last time Vivian would come to understand that she ever saw Ingrid Halverson in person, though they would speak, off the record, 3 more times on the phone over the next 18 months. And once, much later, Ingrid would send her a Christmas card with a photograph of a very ugly dog on it, and Vivian would keep it on her refrigerator for a year. At 11:40, Adrian said, "Ready?" "Yes." She said goodbye to Desmond. Desmond stood up for her again and kissed her on the forehead the way her father had sometimes kissed her on the forehead when he was worried about her. And she did not cry because she had done her crying on the terrace, and she had a plan in place now for the rest of the crying, which was that she was going to do it tomorrow, in bed at 10 a.m. with Adrian's dog, and not a minute before. Adrian did not help her with her coat. He had learned, a long time ago, that she preferred to put on her own coat. He stood behind her, the way a man stands behind a woman when he wants the photographers outside to understand, without a word being said, what the arrangement was. And they walked out of the Halverton Hotel into the cold November wet, and the Maybach was at the curb already, and Wiley was holding the door, and Vivian got in first, and Adrian got in second, and the door closed, and the city, at last, was on the other side of glass. The Wednesday the Manhattan Business Review piece dropped, Vivian was not in New York. Adrian had suggested on Sunday that they go upstate for 3 days, and she had said yes before he had finished the sentence because she had not realized, until he said it, how badly she wanted to be away from her own phone. They went to a house Adrian kept in a county 2 hours north of the city where the trees had already lost most of their leaves and the sky, in the mornings, came in low and gray and smelled faintly of wood smoke from someone else's chimney down the road. The house was not what she had expected. Adrian Volkov's house, in her imagination, had had black furniture. Adrian Volkov's house, in fact, had a lot of beige. There was a rag rug in the kitchen that looked like something someone's aunt had made in 1978, and a wooden rocking chair by the wood stove that had, when Vivian asked, actually belonged to Adrian's grandmother, who had died in Queens in 1994. There was a dog. The dog was a large, serious-faced mutt named Peter, spelled with 2 E's. Adrian told her because a child had named him, and the child had been a serious speller, and Peter spent most of the 3 days following Vivian from room to room at a polite distance, as if he had been given explicit instructions to do so, which, Vivian suspected, he had. On Wednesday morning, the piece dropped at 6 a.m. Eastern. Vivian did not read it at 6 a.m. She was, at 6 a.m., asleep. She woke at 7:45 to the smell of coffee. She came down the stairs in one of Adrian's flannel shirts, which was both too big for her and, in a way she could not articulate, exactly the right size, and she sat at the kitchen table, and Adrian poured her a cup of coffee, and he set the iPad down in front of her and he said, "It's up. Do you want to read it now or later?" "Now." "Okay." "Adrian." "Yeah." "Are you going to read it with me?" "Only if you want." "I want." He sat down beside her. Peter came and lay down on her foot. She read the piece. It ran to about 9,000 words. It was structured, cleanly, and without sentimentality, around a single transaction in 2022 in which Halden Logistics had, through a chain of 4 shell companies, one of which Coal Equity had created specifically for the purpose, received a state contract it should not have received, paid a series of consulting fees to an entity in the Caymans that did not exist in any meaningful way, and in return delivered to Coal Equity a stream of income booked as advisory revenue that had flowed quietly into Ethan Cole's personal accounts at a firm in Zurich. The piece named names. It named Preston Halden, who had, the piece noted in a single cold sentence, entered into a proffer agreement with the Southern District of New York on the afternoon of the Halverton Gala. It named 2 of Ethan's board members, whose resignations, the piece said, had been accepted that morning at 3:15 a.m. It named Ethan. It named him 14 times. It did not name Vivian once. It did not name Adrian either. The piece quoted a woman identified only as a former senior executive's spouse as saying, and Vivian saw, reading it, that it was in fact a sentence she had said to Ingrid in a kitchen in late September, which she had entirely forgotten saying, "The thing no one talks about is how quiet it is. You think betrayal is going to be loud. It isn't. It's very quiet. It's the quietest thing that has ever happened to you." She set the iPad down. "Okay. Okay. Okay, Adrian. You all right?" "Yes." "You sure?" "Yes." "You want to cry?" "No." "You want to call someone?" "No." "You want to eat something?" "Yes." He made her eggs. She ate the eggs. She did not that morning cry. She took the dog for a walk on a dirt road that ran along the back of the property. And the dog, who had understood all 3 days that he was on assignment, walked at her left heel, and at one point a rabbit crossed the road 20 feet in front of them, and the dog, without looking up at her for permission, simply continued walking, which Vivian understood was because he had decided, in some part of his dog brain, that she was today the more important thing. She came back. She took a bath. She slept, from 2 to 4, the deepest sleep of her adult life. When she woke up, Adrian was in the rocking chair by the wood stove, reading a book, and he looked up at her and he said, "Your mother called." "Oh?" "She says she's proud of you and she doesn't need you to call back until tomorrow." "That's fair." "She also says to tell you your cousin Dennis is getting divorced." "Oh God, not Dennis. Dennis. Poor Dennis. Your mother said, and I quote, 'Tell her it's about time.'" Vivian laughed. It was a small, real laugh, and it surprised her, coming out of her mouth in the quiet room, and Peter, who was asleep on the rug, thumped his tail once against the floor, acknowledging the laugh without opening his eyes. The unwinding of Ethan Cole's life did not happen the way he had, in the quiet moments of the previous week, begun to fear it would. It did not happen in a single crashing afternoon. It did not happen with handcuffs. It happened the way all of these things, in fact, happen. In a long, slow administrative sequence, over months, in rooms without windows, with a great deal of paperwork. On the Thursday after the Halverton Gala, the board of Cole Equity convened at 7 a.m. By 9:15, Ethan had been removed as CEO. By 9:40, he had been removed from the board. By 10, a statement had gone out to the press. By noon, his access card no longer opened the doors on the 34th floor, though he had not attempted to use it because Marty had told him, specifically, not to. By the following Monday, the Chang Holdings piece and the Nevada piece, the two things Marty had said would survive, had been quietly sold to a firm in San Francisco for substantially less than they were worth, because the buyer, sensibly, had understood that they were buying from a distressed seller and had priced accordingly. Ethan got about $11 million out of the sale, net. His lawyers got $2 million. The rest would go, over the following 18 months, to the settlement with the Southern District, which Marty negotiated over the course of 7 meetings in a conference room in Lower Manhattan, and which resulted, in the end, in a deferred prosecution agreement, a fine that was larger than any number Ethan had previously ever seen applied to his own life, and a period of supervised release that required him to report once a month to an officer in an office building in Brooklyn, which he reached by taking the train because his driver had been let go in January. Kara's divorce was, in the end, not the apocalypse Marty had forecast. Kara got the apartment in Tribeca, which she did not want, and sold within 90 days. She got a settlement figure that her mother's firm had calculated down to the dollar, and that her mother, over a long phone call with Marty on a Sunday evening in December, had secured without a single raised voice. Kara, in the settlement, did not ask for alimony. She did not need it. She had, it turned out, been saving more than Ethan had ever noticed, and she had, it turned out, a book deal. She signed with an imprint Desmond Eklund did not run, which was, Desmond said, her choice, and a good one, for a memoir that would appear 18 months later under the title The Wife After. Vivian did not read the book. Vivian made a small point, she thought, of not reading the book. But Adrian's mother, who lived in Florida, read it and called Adrian to tell him, with the blunt amusement of an 81-year-old Ukrainian woman who had seen too many marriages to be sentimental about any of them, Adriushka, the Kara girl is not stupid. I was wrong about the Kara girl. Tell your Vivian I said so. Vivian laughed when Adrian reported this and said, tell your mother I said thank you. I told her. What did she say? She said, of course you did. Vivian is polite, but also tell her I still want to meet her before Easter, or I will be offended. Ah. Yeah. Adrian? Yes. I think I'd like to meet your mother before Easter. Okay. Is she going to... She's going to love you. You don't know that. Vivian, I am going to tell you something about my mother. My mother has 2 opinions about every person she has ever met in her life. Opinion 1 is strong person. Opinion 2 is not strong person. There is no third opinion. There has never been a third opinion. She has had the same 2 opinions since 1962. She has already decided, based on secondhand reports, that you are opinion 1. She has not been wrong about this in my lifetime. You are going to be fine. Wear a scarf. She is going to tell you you are too thin. You are not too thin. She is going to feed you anyway. Vivian met his mother in February. She wore a scarf. The scarf was not enough. His mother fed her. His mother also, over the course of 2 dinners and 1 lunch, told her 3 things that Vivian would, for the rest of her life, remember. Number 1, that no woman who had ever been told she was crazy by a man in a nice suit had actually been crazy, and that the nice suit was, in most cases, the clue. Number 2, that Vivian's hands, which were unsteady when she lifted her teacup at the first dinner, were going to be steady again within the year, and that this was not because of anything she, Vivian, would do, but because of time. And that time, the mother said, was the only real doctor and should be paid accordingly. Number 3, that Adrian had been, as a child, terribly afraid of thunderstorms, and had once hidden under a kitchen sink in Queens for 4 hours during one, and that Vivian should file this information away for later use. Vivian filed it away. She did not, for the record, ever need to use it. But she liked knowing. The Haven Legal Fund, in March, received a grant from a foundation run by Noor Rahimi Fletcher, which was followed, within weeks, by 3 more grants from donors, whose names Vivian did not recognize and whose money arrived, in each case, through a law firm that had been briefed, very carefully, by someone on the fund's operating procedures. The fund hired 3 full-time attorneys. It hired a social worker. It hired an office manager. And the office manager, a woman named Pilar Diaz, had been, in her previous job, Sloan Marchetti's assistant. Sloan had let her go in January in what Pilar called, in her interview with Vivian, a pretty standard mid-level restructuring, and Vivian hired her on the spot. Sloan, for her part, had not called Vivian after the gala, not for 3 months. In February, on a Tuesday afternoon, she sent a letter. The letter was handwritten on the Marchetti personal stationery, and it was 4 pages long, and Vivian read it once and put it in a drawer and did not read it again. She did not write back. She did not think of it as cruelty. She thought of it, instead, as the thing she had said into the microphone. I would rather, going forward, that the people who did not show up for me not show up for me. In April, Sloan and her husband separated. In May, Sloan called Pilar, having somehow gotten the number, and asked if there was any chance at all, of meeting with Vivian, even briefly, because she, Sloan, was in the process of a very difficult thing and needed, she thought, an attorney. Pilar, who had been briefed by Vivian on precisely this eventuality, said, Sloan, we don't handle divorces at Haven. We can refer you. I can give you 3 names, all of them women, all of them excellent. I'm going to email them to you now. Oh. Sloan. Yes. Vivian says hello. Vivian hopes you are safe. I am safe. Good. Go safely. She hung up. Pilar reported the call to Vivian at the end of the day, over the phone, while Vivian was in the kitchen upstate, which had by then become her kitchen too, chopping parsley. Vivian listened. She put the knife down. She said, Thank you, Pilar. That was exactly right. You sure? Yes. Not too cold? No. Okay. Pilar. Yes. Did she sound... Was she... She sounded okay. Okay? She sounded like a woman who is going to be okay in about 2 years. Yeah, I think she'll be okay. Yeah. Vivian hung up. She picked up the knife. She finished chopping the parsley. Adrian came in from the other room where he had been on a call. A real one. The kind he took twice a week in a study with a door that locked. And he kissed the back of her neck once, in passing, and he said, Who was that? Pilar. Anything I should know? No. Okay. And that was in the end how most of it was handled. Quietly, in kitchens, by women on phones, over the course of months, at the slow, real pace of real life, and without any of the theatrical weather Vivian had once, in her first raw weeks of planning, imagined revenge was supposed to have. She thought about that sometimes. The theatrics she had imagined and not, in the end, delivered. She thought about it most often when she was alone in the car, driving between the city and upstate, which was a drive she now did twice a week. She thought about the woman she had been, on the bathroom floor in the hospital, in a paper gown, and how that woman had fantasized, in her worst moments, about a specific and detailed revenge on Ethan Cole. A revenge that had involved, in its fullest form, Ethan being publicly humiliated on live television, and Ethan losing all his teeth, and Ethan being personally punched in the face by a specific woman, not Vivian, whom Vivian had in her delirium cast as a sort of professional avenger. None of that had happened. What had happened, instead, was that Ethan had lost his company and most of his money, and his second wife, and his board seats, and his corner table at a restaurant in Midtown he had frequented for 11 years, and he had done this over the course of a long winter and spring, by degrees, without Vivian ever raising her voice again after the gala. And Vivian had, in the same period, fallen in love, started a foundation, learned to cook 4 new dishes, put back 15 pounds, and met an 81-year-old Ukrainian woman who had, after a second dinner, handed her a small gold pin in the shape of a bird and said, "This is from me to you. Not from Adrian, you understand. From me, because I like you." She thought about these two lists, sometimes, side by side, and she tried, in her private way, to learn from the comparison. She decided it slowly, over months, and never wrote it down, because she had a horror of becoming the kind of woman who wrote down her epiphanies, was that the theatrics had never been the point. The theatrics had been a thing she had fantasized about, because she had, at the time, had no access to anything realer. The theatrics had been the grief, in the shape of a revenge fantasy, the way grief took different shapes in different people. Some people became drinkers. Some people joined cults. She had, for a month in March, plotted a televised punch. They were all, she came to think, the same thing, the mind trying to build a small movable room inside the disaster so that the disaster could be, for a few hours a day, something the mind could stand in and control. What had gotten her out was not the movable room. What had gotten her out was the paperwork. What had gotten her out was a woman named Iris, her forensic accountant, a 64-year-old former IRS agent who wore orthopedic shoes and said sweetheart with an enormous amount of irony, who had, in May of the previous year, sat across Vivian's mother's kitchen table and said, "Mrs. Cole, I am going to walk you through 7 years of your bank statements, and we are not going to stop until I am sure that you understand what your husband has been doing. And I am telling you now that this is going to take us 3 weeks, and you are going to be very angry with me by the end of it, and I am not going to apologize for that." They had done it in 3 weeks. Iris had been right about the anger. Vivian had, on the last day, thrown a pencil across the kitchen, hard, and hit a framed photograph of Vivian's father, and broken the glass. And Iris had said, "Good throw," and gone to get a broom. It was not a cinematic moment. Vivian had not practiced it in a mirror. The room had not gone silent. There had been no audience. There had been her in her mother's kitchen, and a woman named Iris with orthopedic shoes and a broken photograph, and the beginning, that afternoon, of a plan that had nothing to do with Ethan and everything to do with a foundation and a lawyer and the word self, which Iris had underlined 4 times on a legal pad that day. That was the night Vivian had picked up the phone and called Adrian for the first time. In June, a year and a month after the gala, Vivian stood on the terrace of the Halverton Hotel again. She was not there for a gala. She was there for a wedding. The wedding was Desmond Eklund's granddaughter's, which Desmond had asked her to attend, and which Adrian had insisted they not miss, because Adrian had a strange, quiet affection for Desmond that Vivian did not fully understand and did not need to. The wedding was small, as society weddings went, and Vivian wore a blue dress, not a black one, and she stood on the terrace after the ceremony holding a glass of champagne, and she looked at the stone railing under her hand and remembered, suddenly, the cold under her palm the last time she had stood here, and the feeling of Adrian's little finger hooked around hers, and the taxi hissing on the wet street below. Adrian came out. He stood beside her. He did not touch her. He had learned over 13 months exactly when not to touch her. "You good?" "Yeah." "You thinking about last time?" "Yeah." A pause. The evening was warm, not cold. The city below them smelled of hot asphalt and a hot dog cart on the corner, and a taxi turning at 57th, and somewhere, lilacs. "Adrian. I want to tell you something. I've been thinking about it. I want to get it right." "Okay." "I don't want to be grateful to you." He was quiet. "I don't mean I'm not grateful. I am for some things. For Peter. For the upstate house. For your mother. For a lot of things. I mean, I don't want my love for you to be a gratitude love. I don't want to be the woman who loves you because you showed up. I want to be the woman who loves you because I love you, which is a different thing, and which I have been, I think, working on. I know the difference. I thought you might. I don't want the other kind either." "No? No, it's boring," she laughed. "Adrian. Vivian. I'm not the woman I was on the phone in April. No. And I'm not the woman I was at the gala either. No. And I want you to promise me something. Okay, if I ever, for any reason, start to sound like a rescued woman again, start to talk like her, start to live like her, I want you to tell me. Not nicely. I want you to say, Vivian, you're sliding back into it. Pick yourself up. I want that to be the deal. Okay. You'll promise? I'll promise. And the other direction. What other direction? If I ever start being for you what you warned me in October you didn't want me to be, an obligation, a thing you feel responsible for, a small scared person you're carrying across a river. If that ever starts happening, you tell me, not nicely, same deal. He thought about it. Okay. Adrian. Yeah. I love you. I know. I also love you. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'd say. They did not say anything else for a while. Below them, the city went on doing what the city did. A cab pulled up. A man in a suit that did not quite fit got out of the cab and handed money through the window and walked, a little unsteadily, to the corner. He had not been at the wedding. He was not anyone Vivian knew. He was simply a man on a sidewalk going home to an apartment she could not see, and he would have, she thought, his own evening and his own weather, and his own private struggle with whatever he was struggling with, and none of it would touch her. She thought about Ethan for the first time in weeks, not with anger, not with pity, with a kind of small, wondering neutrality, the way a person might think about a house she had once lived in but no longer owned. She thought about the last time she had seen him, which had been from across a courtroom in February, at a deposition she had sat in on at Iris's advice. He had lost weight. His hair had begun, at the temples, to go silver, which had suited him, which had been the most annoying thing about it. He had looked up once, across the room, and their eyes had caught, and he had looked away first. She had thought, at the time, that she would feel something in her chest, triumph, contempt, grief, some large weather. She had felt, instead, a small, precise thing, like a click, like the last piece of a lock turning. That was all. A click. And then the deposition had resumed, and she had written 3 words on a legal pad for her lawyer and passed it across the table, and the afternoon had continued. She hadn't seen him since. Marty, she had heard through the industry grapevine, which was now her grapevine too, in a way it had never been when she was married, had quietly resigned from representing him in April, and Ethan was now being represented by a younger attorney at a smaller firm, which Marty had privately told a mutual friend was the correct move for everyone involved. Ethan had moved out of the city, at some point in the spring, to a town in Connecticut that Vivian had never been to. He had, per the grapevine, begun dating someone, a woman, not young this time, a 46-year-old widow with 2 children, and the grapevine's verdict on the widow was that she was nice, which the grapevine said in a tone that suggested she was nice enough to deserve better than Ethan, but possibly not smart enough to figure that out for a year or 2 yet. Vivian hoped, without a great deal of heat, that the widow figured it out in time. She also hoped, at the edges, that Ethan, in Connecticut, in a smaller house, with a smaller life, might one day come to be a man who did not do to the widow what he had done to her. She did not believe he would, but she hoped, the way you hope for weather you cannot control. That was, she had come to understand, the thing you were allowed to do when you were no longer the one being rained on. Inside, the wedding band had started up. Desmond came out onto the terrace in his slightly crooked tuxedo and said, "Come on, you two. My granddaughter is making me dance, and I refuse to make a fool of myself alone." And Adrian, who could not dance and had said so, on the record, on at least 4 separate occasions, rolled his eyes and went inside anyway, and Vivian followed. On the dance floor, she discovered what she had long suspected, that Adrian could, in fact, dance. Not well, not even competently. But he had a sense of rhythm, and he knew the shape of a waltz, which his mother, apparently, had forced him to learn at 13, and he moved her around a small circle of parquet without stepping on her feet and without, visibly, hating it. She laughed at him twice. He allowed it. Desmond danced with his granddaughter and cried a little. The band played something about the moon. A waiter went by with a tray of something Vivian did not bother to identify, and at some point, in the middle of a song Vivian did not know the name of, she stopped moving. She stopped in the middle of the floor, and she looked up at Adrian, and she said, "I need to tell you something." "Now?" "Now." "Okay. I am happy." He looked at her. "Right now," she said. "In this room, right now. I am happy. Okay? I wanted you to know. I wanted someone to know, and I didn't want to wait until the car. Vivian, yeah, I'm happy too. Yeah? Yeah. Okay? Okay? They went back to dancing. They were not good at it. They were laughing a little by the end of the song. The band moved into something else. Desmond's granddaughter, across the floor, caught Vivian's eye and smiled. And Vivian, who had been introduced to her only an hour ago and did not know her at all, smiled back. And if there is a thing to take from this, if there is buried in all of this, a small hard thing a person might carry out of it, it is maybe only this. The woman they tried to erase did not come back louder. She did not come back crueler. She did not come back in the end as the thing the story had wanted her to be, which was a weapon. She came back as a person. She came back with a dog, and a kitchen, and a foundation that paid for lawyers for women who did not have lawyers, and a man who had waited 6 months to call her anything other than my friend, and a mother-in-law who gave her a bird pin, and a dance she was bad at, and a life that had been slowly and badly, and against her own better judgment, put back together by her own hands, 95% of the way, with the last 5% furnished by a small number of people who had loved her enough to not get in her way while she did it. They played the song. She kept dancing, and the city outside went on, and the wind moved across the terrace where she had cried a year ago, and the stone railing was warm now, not cold, and no one, tonight, was watching her to see what she would do next, which was, she realized, the single greatest gift she had ever been given, and which she intended with the rest of her life to earn.